Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the New York City Council hearing on the Committee on Children and Youth. At this time, please silence all electronics and do not approach the dais. I repeat, please do not approach the dais. If you need to fill out a testimony slip, you may do so at the back of the room. If you want to fill out one online, you can fill it out at testimony@council.nyc.gov. That is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Any further questions or concerns, please contact the sergeant. Chair, you may begin.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's hearing on evaluating New York City's foster care system. I am Althea Stevens, Chair of Children and Youth Committee. The purpose of today's hearing is to take a comprehensive look at services and policies that shape the experience of children in foster care. When a child is placed in foster care, they often already facing immensible hardships, instability at home, and separation from their families, and uncertainty about their futures. It is our duty to ensure that the system that's meant to protect them is actually providing safety, stability, and support they need to thrive. Today's hearing will be exploring the range of critical issues, including placement stability, the role of kinship care, residential foster care, and long-term outcomes for youth aging out of the system. I will also examine the financial and structural challenges providers facing, particularly as they struggle with rising costs, staffing shortages, and growing needs among the children they serve. Additionally, we must consider the impact of federal funding, uncertainties whether ACS is doing to encourage secure alternative funding streams to maintain essential services. We will also be looking at the role of supportive services. Programs like Fair Futures, which provide coaching and mentoring to youth in foster care and those who have aged out, have proven to be valuable lifelines. Is this program reaching enough young people? Similarly, ACS Parent Empowerment Program, PEP, which embodies parent advocates with lived experience in case planning units, is a promising step towards supporting families and improving outcomes. But we need to examine its implementation and whether parent advocates are being given the resources and compensation they need to be successful in their roles. Additionally, we need to look at aging out of foster care. We must ask whether the city is doing enough to support youth and those transitioning to adulthood. Are they receiving the housing vouchers they need? Do they have access to education, employment, and mental health services to build independence and successful lives? Too often we hear that from residential care providers that essential items like prom dresses, laptops for college, or emergency funds for students living away from home are not included in the budget and must be funded through private donations. We need to ensure that our young people are not being left behind due to bureaucracy and gaps. Finally, we must hold ACS accountable for commitments outlined in their 5-year strategic plan. The agency had pledged to strengthen kinship placement, improve child assessments, expand access to Medicare-based mental health services, and stabilize the workforce through better pay and contract flexibility. Today, we will be asking how the commitments are being met, what obstacles remain, and what steps are being taken to ensure the best possible outcomes for the children and families in foster care systems. At the heart of this hearing, it is a simple but urgent question. Are we truly doing everything we can to ensure children in foster care are receiving the stability, support, opportunities that they deserve? New York has a duty to care for its most vulnerable children. We must be relentless in making sure that the duality is fulfilled. I look forward to hearing from ACS providers and individuals who with lived experience who can help us better understand what is working, where are we falling short, and what must be done to build a stronger, more efficient foster care system. Finally, I would like to thank my committee staff, Christina and Elizabeth, for all their hard work to prepare for this hearing, and all of the A-team back in District 16. And at this time, I would like to recognize my colleagues, Councilmember Brewer, Councilmember Osei, and Councilmember Lee.
Hello, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Jess Danhauser. I'm the Commissioner of the Administration for Children's Services. I'm joined today by Ina Mendez, the Deputy Commissioner for Family Permanency Services, Thank you to Chair Stevens and the members of the Children and Youth Committee for holding today's oversight hearing regarding New York City's foster care system, and thank you for your remarks, Chair Stevens. We share the urgency. We are intently focused on the safety, permanency, and well-being of the children and youth in the care and custody of ACS, and we appreciate the opportunity to share more about the work ACS and our foster care provider agencies do each and every day to support children and strengthen families. Currently, there are about 6,500 children in foster care, down from 13,000 a decade ago and nearly 40,000 in the late 1990s. Our goal for every child and family we come into contact with is to tailor our response to the individual needs of that family. Our child protective responses, along with our continuum of prevention services, have enabled us to greatly reduce our reliance on foster care as an intervention. At the same time, when there's a child who cannot remain safely at home, we must take steps to seek family court approval for the removal of the child, place the child in foster care, and then provide high-quality services and supports so that children can safely return to their families. Our efforts have resulted in recent improvements in safe reunification. When that is not achievable, we work to achieve permanency for the child through adoption or kinship guardianship. As the foster care census has declined, we have taken important steps to strengthen those services in foster care. We have greatly reduced the use of residential care, so less than 10% of youth in foster care are in residential placements. And at the same time, we've been leading the state in our rate of placing children in kinship foster homes, with about 45% of children in care currently residing with family or close family friends. The safety of children in foster care is a top priority. Our efforts have resulted in important reductions in maltreatment in foster homes. We have strengthened foster parent recruitment strategies, infused trauma-informed training for foster parents, and created a trauma-informed environment at the Children's Center, where some children first enter foster care. We've also strengthened support for young people in care, including major expansions, as you mentioned, in programs like Fair Futures and College Choice, so that youth in care can thrive into their adulthoods. Today, approximately 1/3 of children who come into foster care reunify with their families in that first year, and the rates at which children achieve timely permanency are steadily improving each year. As our outcomes continue to move in a positive direction and our new contracts with providers were being implemented, we developed a 5-year plan with 4 key pillars. Meet the present need with sufficient foster home capacity, focus on family, create safety and stability, and ensure child and youth success and improved well-being. Notably, the voices of youth in care, youth who have been in care, and the families and foster families of these children continue to shape the work we do every day to continuously evolve to better meet the needs of children, youth, and families involved in the foster care system. The remainder of my testimony will focus on these 4 pillars. When a child is placed in foster care, ACS strives to ensure that children are safe and receiving the highest quality of care, that foster parents, both kinship and non-kinship, are receiving the supports they need, and that parents receive the services, supports, and family visits they need to safely reunify. Our new contracts for family-based foster care, residential care, and the supervised independent living program began in July 2023 and enable us to right-size capacity to fit with our current needs while enhancing the foster care program in a number of ways. When children and youth come into care, we prioritize placements with relatives or close family friends because we know that being placed with someone familiar helps reduce trauma, improve stability, and aids in reunification efforts. When kin or fictive kin are not found initially, children are typically placed in non-kinship family foster homes. For family-based foster care, we created the enhanced family foster care model, which blended our prior regular family foster care and family-based therapeutic foster care into one program that provides more therapeutic supports for children who need them, so that sociotherapists, also called behavioral specialists, are part of every case planning team. EFFC also uses a new, more robust, therapeutically responsive foster parent training known as TRIP, so foster parents can respond to the need of children, youth, in care who have experienced trauma and have more complex needs. ACS works closely with our foster care providers to focus on identifying and supporting kin, recruiting and training foster parents, and providing robust supports to foster parents, so we have high-quality certified foster homes for the children in our care. We're also focused on enhancing case planning staff's capacity to assess for safety and risk, while also focusing on caregivers' readiness for unification. Case planners connect parents to services and other supports, all with the goal of reducing children's length of stay in care and increasing safe and lasting reunifications. The new model that you mentioned for foster care includes parents empowering parents, which provides parent advocates system-wide so that every parent working to reunify has the help of a parent advocate with lived experience. Foster care agencies also have more flexible resources to support hiring staff, such as kinship engagement specialists and case aides to help with family visiting. For some youth, residential placements that can address their therapeutic needs are the most appropriate placement. As I mentioned earlier, less than 10% of our children are in residential placement. ACS and other foster care providers and our foster care providers operate a variety of specialized residential care programs designed to meet the specific needs of youth needing this level of care. All of these placements are intended to be temporary, with children stepping down to lower levels of care and ultimately returning to their families or achieving permanency with another family. As part of our new contracts, we added the SILP program to our continuum. We brought it back to our continuum, which are apartment-style placements for older youth ages 18 to 21. A SILP is a 12 to 18-month transitional program for youth who are ready to live on their own while receiving ongoing support, services, and supervision from their foster care agency. Youth in SILPs are provided with supportive services which encourage personal growth and development and empower them to make mature and healthy decisions. Family is at the heart of all of our work. When children and youth need to come into foster care, we work closely with our providers so that each individual and their family members receive the services and support they need to address the issues that led to the placement. All children and families in foster care have access to trauma-informed mental health and supportive services. We prioritize keeping children in their school of origin so that they can maintain their connection to the community, teachers and friends, whenever safe and possible. We also prioritize family time, aka family visiting, as this is both critical for unification and maintaining bonds and connections. The ACS Visiting Unit regularly provides training for providers on how to creatively arrange family time so children and parents are able to spend as much quality time together as possible. ACS also operates the Children of Incarcerated Parents program, known as CHIP, which brings children to foster care to visits with their parents on Rikers Island and other facilities throughout New York State and the surrounding states. CHIP makes every effort to make visits as family-friendly as possible, helping families maintain and strengthen their bonds even in this challenging environment. Foster care is intended to be temporary, while ACS and our providers work with families to address the safety issues that led to foster care. To do this, our foster care providers engage parents in the service and permanency planning process, which is now enhanced through the use of parent advocates, who can use their lived experience to help guide and support parents. Our providers proactively plan for the safe reunification of children and engage youth in the development of their own service and permanency planning. When reunification is not possible, ACS and our providers seek other permanency options, including adoption and kinship guardianship. ACS uses a variety of strategies, including data analysis, technical assistance, family team conferences, and case reviews to strengthen agencies' practice to achieve permanency safely and as timely as possible. Overall, ACS is committed to lifelong connections for all young people. For youth who exit foster care without legal permanency, there are Fair Futures coaches and aftercare supports to work with youth to develop and maintain a network of supports outside of foster care. ACS and our providers appreciate the anxiety and trauma that removal and placement into foster care can create for children and youth. We know that it is critical for us to provide safe, stable placements for children in foster care. While many children are placed directly into a foster home, including with kin, for others, this work starts at the Children's Center. Most children who go to the Children's Center spend fewer than 7 days there. But we know that for some children and youth, the stays are longer, with about 15% of youth remaining at the Children's Center for over 30 days. Our teams at the Children's Center has worked tirelessly to enhance on-site programming, supports, and safety. Most recently, we've renovated the intake area to be more trauma-informed and welcoming, created a cell phone cafe, renovated the family visiting area to be more family-friendly, and opened a comfort shop where children and youth can select the items that make them most comfortable, such as pajamas, stuffed animals, books, and sneakers, all age-appropriate. It is essential for us to continue to recruit foster parents, particularly for teens and large sibling groups. We have worked closely with our providers to implement robust foster parent recruitment, support, and certification strategies. In fiscal year 24, our providers recruited nearly 500 new foster homes citywide. Once children are placed into foster care homes, it is essential that the children remain safe and well cared for. We've been consistently seeing the data regarding maltreatment in foster care decline. This past year, 98% of foster homes have no incidents of indicated neglect or abuse. As of January 2025, OCFS has shifted the foster care training model statewide to the National Training Development Curriculum. The training addresses separation, loss, grief, trauma, and addresses cultural differences. This training supports the foster caregiver's ability to determine their own capacity to parent and/or explore additional supports, resources, or training needed to enhance their capacity. It provides preparation for the foster caregivers by increasing their knowledge and ability to understand and respond to the unique needs of children placed in their care. Trauma Responsive and Informed Parenting, TRIP, is also provided to all New York City foster parents. TRIP is a learning program designed to prepare and support foster parents and child welfare professionals who are either parenting or working with children with therapeutic needs. It helps participants gain a trauma-informed lens when caring for children with significant emotional behavioral needs. TRIP coaches participants to practice examining and reinterpreting the behavior of children in order to appropriately respond to their underlying thoughts, feelings, needs, rather than react to their behavior. Finally, ACS expects all foster parents to be affirming and receive training on supporting LGBTQAI+ children and youth. Stability is also critical for children in foster care. ACS and our providers take many steps to support foster parents and foster care placements so that they can be preserved when in the child's best interest, and children in foster care have the fewest moves possible before achieving permanency. Last fiscal year, excluding youth who moved to kin or reunified with siblings, 88% of children and youth in foster care did not experience a placement change. Our overarching goal is for all of the children, youth, and families we serve to thrive. We have an important responsibility to the youth in our care, and we strive to provide them with the tools and skills they need to become successful adults. We continue to listen to them and who are in foster care and have been in foster care so that we continue to improve our programming to meet the needs they identify. Young people have helped shape programs such as Fair Futures, College Choice, and our soon-to-be launching Career Choice program. Youth told us they needed ongoing support and to have someone involved in their case who was just there for them. As a result, we developed the Fair Futures coaching and tutoring model and have expanded it to providing ongoing support to youth up to the age of 26. In calendar year 2024, more than 4,000 youth benefited from Fair Futures coaching and/or tutoring. Of the 2,000 young people coached for more than 90 days, 92% achieved at least 3 positive outcome goals, such as reconnecting to high school, grade promotion, graduation, enrollment in college or vocational training, or successfully engaging in a job or internship. We also strengthened and modified our community college program into what is now known as College Choice. In 2024, participation in the ACS College Choice program, where tuition, housing, and a daily living stipend are given to youth in foster care attending college, doubled from the program's inception just 2 years ago. In the fall 2024 semester, there were over 400 youth in College Choice. Students are attending schools locally, within New York, and throughout the country, at both public and private institutions. College Choice students are represented at every community college, attend many SUNY schools, such as Stony Brook and Binghamton, can be found on other college campuses within New York, like Syracuse and Ithaca College, and are also studying at Vanderbilt in Tennessee and Holy Cross in Massachusetts. College Choice also supported a student studying abroad in Japan. As announced in the State of the City in the coming year, ACS will expand Fair Futures and College Choice to serve more youth and create Career Choice, a program similar to College Choice, but for youth who choose not to attend college, at least for that time. We look forward to sharing more information about this program when it rolls out next fiscal year. Youth in care also benefit from our collaboration with other city agencies such as DYCD, Department of Social Services, and NYCHA. For instance, children and youth in care participate in after-school programs and the Summer Youth Employment Program. ACS also assists youth leaving care and families reunifying to obtain housing through NYCHA or with City FEP's rental vouchers. Our collaboration with Anthos Home, which regionally assisted our 100th youth secure permanent housing, is helping to connect youth in care and newly reunified families to housing more quickly than in the past. Our agencies also help equip youth with the financial management tools that help them prepare to maintain housing stability. I'm happy to share of all the 100 young people who've moved in with Anthos support, all remain in their apartments. ACS is committed to providing high-quality services and improving outcomes for LGBTQIA+ youth in foster care. We have a dedicated LGBTQIA+ Equity Strategies Director who's responsible for policy, best practice, and guidance. The LGBT Equity Strategies team focuses on ensuring all ACS and provider agency staff treat all youth and families equitably and with empathy, regardless of sexual orientation or gender expression. As I mentioned earlier, all of our work must be centered around youth and family voice. The ACS Youth Leadership Council formally acknowledges the contributions and voice of current and former juvenile justice and foster care involved youth by enabling young people to express their ideas, opinions, views, knowledge, and experience, and develop the competency, values, and connections they need to achieve positive outcomes through their life and their transition into adulthood. ACS also works very closely with the Youth Advisory Board for Fair Futures and Project Unite, which includes youth advocates with experience in either the foster care or runaway homeless youth programs. In conclusion, I want to take a moment to thank all of New York City's foster parents who've opened their hearts and homes for the children and youth in their care. Not only do they open their homes, they give up so much control of their lives, having to get to appointments and visits. We are deeply grateful for all of them. I also want to thank our 25 foster care providers who spend each and every day meeting the needs of the children and youth in foster care, as well as their families. And finally, I want to thank the children and youth who have not only been in the foster care system, but have leveraged that experience to support us to help children and youth who come into foster care after them. Together, we'll be able to meet the needs of families today and better meet the needs of those in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. You did read that pretty fast. It wasn't too bad.
Lots to cover.
So I appreciate that. I think it was because of the heat and you wanted to get through it. But I just want to start off one by just saying, you know, I know coming into this role, you came in with a lot of ideas on trying to right some of the wrongs that a lot of communities felt, you know, especially Black and brown communities. Can you talk a little bit about how you're also trying to shift the culture and some of the challenges you might be facing? Because even in our last hearing, you know, you talked about like a lot of the vision and stuff that you were working on, but then we often have families who are still feeling some of the old repercussions of some of the issues that we're trying to address, or you're trying to address at the top. So how are we ensuring that the work that and your vision that's happening and plans that you're implementing are actually happening? And what safeguards are we putting in? Because again, I had a foster care roundtable with young people, and some of the things that I heard were very upsetting. And so it's not matching up from like the things that you talk about and like how it's being implemented, and understanding you can't be everywhere and do everything. And so how are you shifting the culture with people who might have been there, you know, who've been there longer than you and have a way of doing certain things? How are you shifting the culture?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember. In a variety of ways. Obviously, a lot of the things that I spoke to about training did not include some of the training we do for foster care provider staff. Fair Futures coaches are trained by the Center for Fair Futures. They do a lot of work around motivational interviewing, how to be empathetic. We're also building that on for foster care case planners who are trained in motivational interviewing to really start where that young person is, to start where that family is, and to try to understand what they are hoping for and then build plans around that. For too long, there's been sort of cookie cutter plans that we say, here's what we need you to do, without sort of stopping, seeing the human being in front of us and making sure we're meeting their needs and engaging with how they would like to get there. A lot of it is how we engage with young people to make sure that our providers are engaging with young people and listening to them. And that the young people know there are many avenues to express their concerns. Whether that be the work in any committee that they have at the Children's Center, the youth committees, whether that be our Office of Advocacy, whether that be their attorney. To change culture, we have to build skills. We have to value the right things. You know, when I came into this work, young people told me, how can you expect us to trust you if my 21st birthday is the last time you're going to do anything for me on my birthday? And so we've set out over the years to change that culture, and we're doing that with Fair Futures. We are not all the way there yet. I want young people to know, and they often have my number, call me, reach out to DC Mendez, but reach out to a lot of folks in their continuum, that there's a lot of options for help, that we can pause, bring people together. So it's a multifaceted strategy, but I'm never satisfied until every young person feels like they are heard and they have what they need.
And so I hear some of the stuff that you're doing in the agency, but a lot of the work that you do are contracted out to providers. How do you shift that culture, right? These providers have obviously had these contracts long before you got here. You clearly are trying to shift the process of how things are being done. How are we holding agencies accountable, especially when sometimes when they have longstanding contracts? What does that look like? Because again, I think when I'm hearing a lot of the concerns from parents and families about the things. Some of it's from the providers. And so what does accountability look like for a provider? And has any provider, and I guess since your tenure, have any provider had contracts removed or revoked?
Not in the foster care space, but here's what we do. We have we operate under something called Improved Outcomes for Children. That was a redesign of both the foster care and preventive relationship between ACS and the providers over a decade ago. And in that, while case management decisions are delegated to the providers, it is overseen obviously by the family court as well. We have a dedicated unit that is looking at provider data, so we know which agencies are thriving around stability for kids in care, around permanency for kids in care, and where we need to put in implement plans. And so we look at how many young people went AWOC, to the point of the human trafficking conversation we had last time, to make sure we understand how each provider is doing. We then sit down, craft plans, and hold them accountable for implementation of those, assess whether they are making progress on that data. If they are not, then we begin to move up. We also asked DC Mendez to talk about the Office of Shared Response, and I can talk a little bit about the Office of Advocacy. When young people express a concern or a family expresses concern, there are dedicated staff that dig into that issue, might hold a conference, bring people together to try to create a solution there.
Is this on? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for your question, Councilmember Stevens. So to follow up on, the Commissioner has a vision that aligns with my personal values and my professional values. And so the Division of Family Permanency is very aware of the strategic plans, and we have touch points with providers in very different ways. And so we're able to speak with agency leaders, agency staff. So if there is an issue that gets to the Commissioner's attention, my attention, the Office of Shared Response can follow up on individual cases. We have the Office of Family Team Conferencing. They sit in on case conferences at certain key points. There are times when I may reach out to an ED. To give a very concrete example, we had been sharing some information about a new expectation, probably starting sometime in fiscal year 24. We had a larger meeting, and it was clear the information I was sharing didn't trickle down. So I started something called Third Thursdays, and that is for all case planning staff to join so they can hear directly from our team. This is what our expectation is around this. This is what our expectation is around that, so that we can continue to have the conversations. Youth reach out, they reach out to the Commissioner. I started something in this fiscal year called Dinner with the DC. They're small group meetings. We're starting with older youth. They come together and we eat. I go to the various tables and hear their concerns and what needs to be followed up on. It gets followed up on. So we're really trying to create an opportunity. There are times when providers will reach out and say, well, how can we do X, Y, and Z? And I often say, pay for it, we'll get it approved, right? And so we do that, and we haven't had too many problems yet. And so that's what we really want to do, because to support older youth, to support youth who have exited care but are now coming back and reaching out for help. We had a young man from December, January, February, had to work with our community-based organizations to help him. He's about 24 now. He's no longer in care. But last week I got a picture of his keys in the kitchen in the background. So Anthos Home was able to move him in. That's a culture shift, because these kids aren't in care. They're over 21, but we're continuing to work with them. And it's conversation by conversation, example by example, to let everyone know within FPS, within ACS, that this is an expectation.
And while we haven't closed any agencies, Chair, if I can, in the last few years, there used to be 50 foster care agencies. Mm-hmm. There's 25 today.
Is there a reason why it shrunk by half? Was it you were trying to?
I think sort of largely during about 15 years ago, there were so many fewer kids in care. There was a very intentional right sizing. When we first introduced EQUIP, which is now our scorecard, which scores and ranks each agency on various outcomes like safety and permanency and well-being, that work led us to make some decisions to shrink the system. We are today moving contract capacity around based on how well they're doing in permanency, how well they're doing in recruiting and supporting foster parents. And so we do have performance-based contracting in place. If an agency is demonstrating concerns in a particular area that are egregious, we have the right to end contracts, to use corrective action, and a variety of other tools.
Yeah, I have some more questions on that, but they're gonna kill me if I don't get to some of their questions, so let me stop veering off. On January 27th, the Trump administration issued a memo halting all agency grants, loans, and fiscal assistance programs. The Office of Management and Budget detailed the federal program subject to freeze Title IV-E of the Social Security Act, which funds foster care as well as adoption assistance, child abuse, and neglect block grants and programs designed to educate young people aging out of child welfare system. This order was rescinded the following day. How much funding does ACS receive from federal grants, such as title grants and other federal sources? And please provide a breakdown of the funding sources and the amount.
Sure. So I'll give a broad overview, and then we can provide additional detail. ACS receives about $1.35 billion in federal funds. It falls into sort of two broad areas. One is childcare through the childcare block grant, which goes to the state, and the state divvies up across the localities. The one more relevant today is Title IV. Title IV-E is one portion of Title IV. There's about $310 million that we get each year. It has been the percentage of young people who are eligible for Title IV has been going down year over year because of some archaic federal policies. Title IV, generally, there's another $100 million or so that are in that, which includes things like adoption subsidy, right? Because we continue to provide adoption subsidy past a child's time in care. So that's the breakdown. Beyond that, we can get you additional detail.
Given the uncertainty surrounding federal funding under the new administration, what contingency plan does ACS have in place to mitigate the effects of future federal funding freezes or reductions?
Right now, OMB has been very clear to continue the path forward. None of the investments that we've made are being pulled back at this moment. We are monitoring very closely. Title IV-E is really key. It's also was subject to bipartisan legislation not too long ago to expand its use not only for foster care but potentially for preventive services. The state is still working with the federal government around drawing that money down. So it is a sort of bipartisan supported grant. So I'm hopeful that.
I mean, at this point,
Yep. So we're watching. Exactly.
It's all executive order. So.
We're watching everything extremely closely. OMB wants to work with us sort of more generally around contingency because we're not sure exactly where changes might show up, and so we're just monitoring vigorously.
Yeah, because I mean, what did you say? $1.3 billion is a significant amount, and losing that funding, I don't see how we could make that up.
It would hurt a lot of families, including on the child care side, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think it's important that we continue to fight for that and highlight that. How does ACS communicate with foster care agencies and service providers during this moment of federal uncertainty? Like, what's the messaging and how have you been working with them? Because I can see this, obviously, we all are feeling anxiety in this moment. But even with the uncertainty where there was a freeze and all these things going on, what is the messaging to our providers?
So as you know, the providers are the foster care providers, and almost all the prevention providers are part of CAFCA, the Council on Family and Child Caring Agencies. I think I see Dr. Charles here.
Is here, of course.
We are in regular communication at my level with Kathleen Brady-Stepien and with Dr. Charles to make sure everything we are learning, everything they are learning, we're in communication around. We are, in addition to the funding issues, we are working on guidance to make sure that the providers are clear that we are staying the course to support our LGBTQAI+ young people, including gender-affirming care. We met with Legal Aid this morning. They're helping us with some feedback on that language, but we're going to be getting that out early next week. We're trying to make sure that we are communicating what we believe in for our young people, for our families, that we are moving forward to take care of young people who are mostly Black and brown, who are need to know that they're supported. We know that there's an overrepresentation of LGBTQ kids in foster care. And so those things are central to us to speak to. And we're getting that message out through Kafka and to the providers regularly and often, in addition to the guidance that's been put out around immigration.
Thank you. ACS relies on multiple funding sources to cover foster care expenditures, many of which are state mandates and subject to annual inflation. What is the current reimbursement rate for foster care parents, and how are those rates determined, and what metrics are used in the calculations?
So they are set by the state. There are three, they're variable by age and by need of the child. And so there are three categories. One is sort of the basic category, special needs, and then exceptional needs. And so it ranges for 0 to 5 on the basic level for $36 a day to $103 for a teenager who has exceptional needs, who might have a developmental disability, as one example. The state, you may recall from budget hearings, increased the rates, which we are very supportive of, and they've been increasing over the past fiscal years. It's an unfunded mandate at this point. They did not add additional monies for us to cover that, so it is one of the cliffs that we speak with OMB to make sure we can continue to cover those rates. So that we can provide the exact detail in writing.
Okay. Or in March, we'll see you next month.
That's right. I'll see you in a month.
In a fiscal 2026 preliminary budget, ACS budget included 2 program areas specifically dedicated to expenditures related to foster care service. Can ACS confirm if all foster care related expenses are housed in those program areas? And please provide the budget codes associated with those foster care related expenses.
Thank you. The bulk of them are in those categories. There's a few that are fairly technical that get to sort of some of the adoption subsidies and some of the other. So I have the budget codes here that cover the entire foster care, and so we can give it back to Stephanie.
Oh, someone has to.
And no, it shouldn't go up.
She needs to.
I tried that last time to come give it to you.
I know, and I want you to get tackled. You can just hand it to me here. Thank you. Prevention services provider had expressed that they have become a catchment for care cases, resulting in supporting youth with high needs that are unmet by ACS limited budget. How are decisions made regarding the services and materials, resources a family receives?
So this is a little surprising to us. The CARES is typically low to moderate risk, and so in certain situations, perhaps there's a young person who's struggling with attendance, and so it goes down the CARES track, and then we work with them. They're 15 years old, they're school phobic, they have, they're connected to some negative peer group that we want to help them. So then we will be working with either our prevention providers on the child welfare side. We have programs like FFT and BSFT, evidence-based models, to help family therapies for teenagers. We also have our FAP program, which is operated out of our juvenile justice side, but is available across the continuum. And so in there, we've added Fair Futures and mentoring. So I want to talk to our providers a little bit more about what they're seeing in this regard. Clearly, we've seen that young people coming out of COVID, have a lot of needs, and I want to make sure we're meeting them, and that they know how to access the Fair Futures on the front end, not just for foster care, and all of those preventive services.
Yeah, because I think that is important, because that is definitely something I've heard from multiple providers of, like, CARES becoming this catchment area. And even just quickly, I think I mentioned this to Stephanie last time I seen her. Even with that, with the CARES, someone did a ACS report, and when the CARES person got back to them, they told them, well, you're a social worker, you could do this yourself, why are you calling us? And so again, I think some of this, I'm still working on the email to get you the person's name, but I want us to make sure that we're making a look at, like, some of the things that we are talking about here at the top are not necessarily trickling down, because that was something that was super alarming to me when I had, and this was a school social worker who had called in educational neglect, that they were like, you're a social worker, you can make your own referrals, you don't need to call ACS for this.
Yeah, so much of it is how you say it, right? So we're doing loads of training, as you know, Chair, that is equipping schools with resources, and also resources through ACS that they don't have to call a CPS investigation if it's unnecessary. And so it sounds like the wrong way to deliver a message that we have help. We have folded cares into our child staff forum, and so which we get between 500 and 700 of our staff on every
But I
single
just want
week.
to
So
also
it's
just
a
point out, this person who
opportunity.
called ACS is not a person who would call lightly. She's been social worker.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so for her, even when she reached out to me, it was a struggle for her to call because she's like, no, I would never call unless it was needed to be elevated. But it was like, why are you calling us? And so now I think even in like some of the spaces, the conversation has been like, well, we're not going to call ESS for anything if that's the case. And so there is some disconnect in some of the things and thinking about, you know, I know that like, and this was actually a charter school, so it was like separate. And so I don't know if they have access to the services and what that looks like, because I did ask them and they were like, well, we haven't heard of that. And so, you know, I just think we still need to figure out like, what is the branding and what does that look like to report some of this stuff back up?
Absolutely. And as it relates to the charter schools, we are doing training for them. We've developed, given the size of Success Academy, we've developed a direct partnership with them as well to make sure that they know how to access services. That kind of language is not acceptable to me either.
Yeah, I'm working on getting a name for you guys
Thank you.
somewhere. I'm working on it.
Thank you.
I do see my colleagues that have a question, so I'm going to pass it over to Councilmember Brewer, and then I have some more questions. So.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I have a question in terms of migrant youth as well as New York City youth. So I know well that if you're 21, you have to move out. So there are a lot of migrant youth doing that. There is a program called Guardianship, so you can go to court, sign up, and end up with kids, and I'm familiar with that program. So my question is, are you getting into the system young people who are migrants or asylum seekers?
So the way we track it, council member, is by destitute children or not. And so a couple years ago, there was about 50 young people who came into our care as destitute. This past year, 119 young people came into our care as destitute. So we saw a modest but important increase in that number. We're developing services. They have everything that's available to a young person who has lived here domestically is available to them. We are working on permanency plans with them, school, et cetera.
Are you doing the guardianship program?
We have not gotten to the point where those young people are turning 21 with us. And
Okay.
our commitment to young people is if they are
do
21
between-
and not having housing, they're staying with us until.
Okay. Because
But-
between 18 and 21, you can do the guardianship program.
So we'll absolutely add that to the.
I'm very good at it, so if anybody needs help, I can do it.
Love it. Thank you.
You do need a lawyer, though. You need
Okay.
somebody legally.
Sergeant Ramos, you guys didn't at the time.
Okay. The next question I have is just in terms of numbers and just generally, how many young people who have aged out of foster care remain with ACS through the Older Youth Services Unit? And what's the most common barrier to continued engagement?
So I'm going to have DC Mendes speak to that work, and Associate Commissioner Cherry is also here. There's about 90 young people who are between the ages of 18 and 20 who are engaged with that unit. That is a population that concerns me greatly. If a young person is signing themselves out of care at 18 or 19, it typically means something isn't right. I want to say we have been driving that population down pretty dramatically. 429 young people aged out in calendar year 23. 69% of those did it after 21. So it used to be thousands of kids,
Yeah.
and so that's a population that we're really concerned about, and we're working to engage.
Okay.
Do you want to add to that?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the unit if you're interested. So we do have what we call the Supervision, the 21 unit, and that is a unit that works specifically with young people between ages 18 to 20 that have decided to sign themselves out of foster care. That unit stays in contact, so upon that time of leaving, they'll get their information, their phone number, their address, where are they gonna stay, and they make regular visits or try to stay in contact. We know young people are young people, so sometimes the phone number changes, the address changes, but what doesn't change is that unit is there on the second floor at 150 William Street. So those young people may come in, and we have services that we can provide if they need something right away, a gift card. We have a clothing closet. But then we continue to work with them. We make connections to community-based organizations and referrals. And if it appears that it's in the best interest for them to come back into care, there is a criteria. We'll hold a conference, and more often than not, they're connected back to the agency they were previously working with. So we do have a provision for that group, and then they can stay in care, and we continue to support kids, as the commissioner mentioned.
So just like everybody else, I love Fair Futures. Everybody loves it. But do you have to opt in? How do you get in? I mean, obviously, if you're interested, you could participate. But do you automatically opt in or not?
Probably wouldn't have happened without you, council member. So first of all, thank you for that. You do not have to opt in. When a young person is in middle school, 8th grade, they begin with high school counseling. We've seen young people really begin to elect their school. In the past, we tried to do high school goal weekend and this kind of stuff. We're seeing actually last year, young people in foster care for the first time were in the top quartile of graduation rates.
Because of Fair Futures.
Because of Fair Futures
That
and
is
that
absolutely
coaching.
correct, yeah.
And so about 4,000 young people have been connected. They have, some of them first accept tutoring or first accept the coaching, or just want to be part of a youth group. And so we're constantly working to engage them more fully. We've also engaged 800 young people after 21. And so the investments that are being made in next year will allow us to continue to expand to make sure that young people 21 to 26, anyone who wants it, can get those supports, and that every young person leaving care, whether they're adopted, whether they're reunified after 16-year-old, that all of those kids can keep their coach.
Okay. All right, just quickly, two other questions. One is, how many young people aging out secured housing using a rental assistance voucher? And then the other question is more of those goddamn buses. I've had so many hearings, and I think we all have, on getting young people from care into the schools.
Yes.
It just goes on and on in temporary housing. So that was my second question. Go ahead. So,
On housing, 23, there were 269 youth who were connected to housing. That includes either through a voucher, NYCHA, or supportive housing. 24, it increased to 320. We are currently working off about 150 HPD Section 8 vouchers that we have access to. If and when those run out, there are other potential Section 8 options. And then obviously we can go back to city FEPS. But since we have the Section 8, we want to use it.
okay. And then just busing, getting people.
Yeah. So
Never seems to work, no matter how much work we put in.
yeah, so we created this policy with the Department of Education, New York City Public Schools, because of that gap period where agencies can get reimbursed for transportation, chaperoning, et cetera. We got the numbers yesterday. About $800,000 has been reimbursed to the agencies, but what we noticed is not every agency is taking full advantage of it. And so we are going to double down and retrain the agencies on this policy that we put out last year, because there does seem to need to be sort of a gap filling measure, because the bus routes are not sort of available within a couple weeks sometimes. And
Well,
so
September's awful. No, I don't know, it all falls apart in September and then gets a little bit better.
And we have,
That's my experience.
for children at the Children's Center, it is a very robust operation. Early every morning, we have our own drivers
But
and
that's
contract
different
drivers.
than the
Absolutely.
regular foster care, NYCHA
Indeed.
family trying to get everybody to school. All right, so I'm
Indeed.
just saying, if we could help more with the buses,
Thank you.
I would appreciate it. All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Just really quickly, I know Councilmember Brewer just asked some questions around housing for young people aging out of foster care. Do you feel like there's significant housing vouchers available to meet the demand for aging out of foster care? And this is a question also that I had, especially within the lottery. Do we often have set asides for young people aging out of foster care? I know there was some in my district. They had maybe 4 or 5 units in those. But is that a need or something that we should continue to push for? Because I don't feel like that's enough as far as in the housing lottery. Are we setting aside? I know we usually do formerly homeless and things like that, but do we have a category where we can set aside units for young people aging out of foster care?
I would be doing our young people disservice if I said it was enough. They would like to see a lot more. They want a lot more choice out of their housing options. are the Fair Futures Youth Advisory Board. This is something that they've been really focused on. Some of our providers, like the Children's Village and New York Foundling, have been creating housing options, permanent housing options for young people, mixed use, but a high set aside for young people. We do currently have enough vouchers. We used up all 200 City FEBS
So
vouchers.
that means you don't have enough?
No.
You've used them all up?
But now we have 150 Section 8 that we're working down. We're in constant talks with OMB about, we think if we use some of these programs federally, if you use them, you can get access to more, right? They're in a sort of a, and so we want to use them as quickly as possible. We started the contract with Anthos, and they've also raised private money so that young people, when they're going to an apartment, know that it's an option, that it's banked. So Anthos goes to landlords, banks apartments, does some of the fixes themselves, and then young people get to choose if that's an apartment that they want to be in. 100 young people have been housed through Anthos with a variety of voucher types. All of them are still stably housed because they stick with them for another 6 months or a year. And so making sure that that next recertification is done, et cetera. We have a long way to go to make sure all of the housing options are adequate, and I wouldn't be representing our kids if I didn't say that. I think lottery set-asides is a great tool to add to the toolkit.
Do you know how often that's happening? Like where we're having set aside specifically in some of the lotteries for formerly, young people aging out of foster care?
I would be guessing.
Okay.
So I will look into it.
Is that
but
low? You can't remember is that low? Because if it was
It's
significant,
not-
you'd have been like,
It's
1,000.
it's much more likely that sort of supportive housing has set asides, and that's sort of something that we want to make sure is high quality. And some of the set asides that I'm familiar with are when our providers have sort of put together an entire package, different tax deals.
Some of our nonprofit providers who are building are doing it, not necessarily the city. Because I think it's something that we do need to look in because
It has city financing. in it.
yeah, because every young person coming out of foster care doesn't need to go to supportive housing, right? Like there needs to
Exactly.
be multiple options. And so, if I'm hearing like, oh, there's a lot for supportive housing, that is not the only need. Some people
That's
can
right.
move independently. So I would definitely love to, work with you on seeing how we can advocate to see more of that being built, especially after we just passed City of Less. Yes, and we're building all of this housing. It was one of my asks and my demands, but it got kind of swept under the rug. But we should continue to fight because I think that it's really important as the city is building. We need to make sure we are building for everyone, right? And I think that this is going to be a really important issue around that. I'm going to stop and hand it over to my colleague, Councilmember Williams.
Hi,
Hi, Councilmember.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I just have a few questions on residential foster care. And I feel like the last hearing, this sort of came up just around how like not all providers are created equal, and so some providers are raising private funds to supplement the work that they're doing, and some maybe don't do that. So this question I think kind of falls in line with that, which is residential care providers have shared that under new contracts, there are still unmet needs for older youth. This includes essentials from prom attire to financial support for youth attending college. Providers often rely on private fundraising to cover these gaps. Is ACS aware of these challenges? Has the agency explored options to increase funding or provide additional resources to address these needs?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, so the residential rates are quite high, right? So you're talking about sometimes $1,000 a day, but it goes into staffing ratios, right? And so the more flexible dollars are what they're talking about, not always the amount. DC Mendez and her team have been working with each provider to make sure they understand all of their budgets. It's about 8 different funding streams that go into a foster care budget, including some preventive dollars that we're able to match for youth development. And so we're making sure they understand also that we have special purchases that they can make. Young people should not having to be getting their prom dress through a private fundraiser. And so there are ways to fund all that. Sometimes there's gaps in how to do that. Do you want to speak about a little bit how you're trying to close that gap?
Sure. Good afternoon, Council Member. So, as the Commissioner mentioned, within the Division of Family Permanency Services, we have a contract management team that works with the agency on their budgets and where they can leverage certain funds in terms of client services. There's also, with the new contracts, there's a area that allows for some funding predictability, so there's a little bit of a variance, if you will, and so if they need to make certain purchases, they can use those funds. So it's constant conversations, as I mentioned earlier. It's a shift because this is different than how they did the contracts before. So it's a lot of reiterating the new expectations and speaking to the right people. And we can continue to have those conversations because everyone should have a prom dress, a tuxedo, whatever it is they need for these milestones in life. I want to make sure everyone in foster care has those opportunities. To just answer the question regarding college, we do have the College Choice Program. Started in, we're providing access to college. We created a centralized program, College Choice, in 2022 with 200 young people. This last fall semester, we had over 400, I think like 438. So anyone that is interested in college, they can make that referral. There's an application process. We have a team. Again, I think it's about sharing the information, making sure it's trickling down so the child care staff knows about the College Choice Program, just like the executive director. So there are opportunities to go to college, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year degree. So if you have specific cases or agencies that might need additional information, please share, because I want to make sure everyone is
Could I just add on to that? Because at my foster care roundtable, the young people in the room were very frustrated because they often feel like they share a lot of the information amongst themselves, especially for like college, being able to get a laptop and things like that where they don't have access. And they're in the conversation, a lot of them felt like if you were with specific providers, they were able to access stuff, whereas like some people didn't. Have you guys thought about doing some type of like information stuff for the young people who are in care so that they can do their own research? I mean, they shouldn't have to, but for them, they were very frustrated and they were like, could we get some type of like app or something where we could have and be able to see all the things that are available to them, because that was one of their requests and frustrations.
Yeah, we absolutely can look at that. We've been doing most of that through making sure that it's been a great partnership with the Center for Fair Futures, that they know everything because they are training directly the coaches in addition to the leadership of that program. But there are some young people who have not engaged there and shouldn't have to engage. There should be multiple ways. And so we'll look at, we do lots of through the Youth Leadership Council, but if it's not happening for every single child, we got to find other ways.
They suggested an app, and I thought that was a great idea of like, I mean, we can use technology, and that's what they use anyway. They were like, could we just get an app and we could just be able to go beep, bop, boop, and figure it out ourselves? Because, I mean, in that moment, what was beautiful was that the young people started to share information with each other and were literally becoming their own case managers, and it was a really good thing. But they were like just how easy it is to even connect with other people who've aged out and things like that. So that was one of their suggestions. So I'll bring it up here. And I'm sorry, I jumped into your time, Councilmember Williams. Go ahead.
It's okay. You're the chair. You have rights and privileges. The next question I have is residential care providers have also shared that there have been violent incidents between youth in their facilities where staff have been harmed or at risk. And in some cases, I'm sure maybe young folk might have been harmed. What security measures are in place to protect staff? And I've heard this a ton of times about the Children's Center, like first-hand accounts from people who have gotten into altercations. So just, I know that is a thing across the agency.
For young people who are in any kind of congregate care, whether it's sort of residential, a group home or a campus or the Children's Center, all the staff,
like one of the juvenile facilities.
So all the staff are trained both in de-escalation and in restraint policies as needed, and that sort of ongoing training. So much of this is about the programming that young people are engaged in, the trust that they have in the staff. We're looking at sort of ways in which we can continue to invest in the staff, because my belief is that that core staff, in addition to adding clinical services and things that we have, that core staff is the difference between a young person getting upset. They might have learned something that triggers them getting upset and having a violent incident. And so We're also working with the providers in an ongoing conversation about advocacy we can do with OCFS. I think there are certain times when particular protocols are appropriate, whether that be if a young person has had a weapon before, the ability to to wand them to make sure everybody is safe. We want to make sure we are respecting the liberty of our young people, but also making sure that every single place is safe. The Children's Center has a series of protocols, and we've been able to drive down a lot of the incidents there, in large part through programming and relationship and trust building. And obviously sort of a lot of attentiveness and making sure that the staffing is strong. These are incidents that we don't want ever to happen. We're working with young people. Sometimes they get triggered, and we have to have all the skills and staff to make sure that they are safe and that staff are safe. I'm deeply grateful to young people. I think sometimes residential gets a bad name because of horrors that have happened in the past, but we have some really dedicated, wonderful staff who show up every day. They're with kids 24/7 that deserve our investment and respect. And so as we look at a declining residential care population, as we've invited the providers to bring to us innovative ideas. One provider said, I don't think I can operate a campus anymore with these new models. All of them have evidence-based models infused. I want to go to sort of a group home model. We work with them on that. We want to keep hearing. Sometimes I think smaller sites are better. So we have a series of what's called AOBHs, Agency Operated Boarding Homes, which is an old name, but it's about 4 to 6 kids who live together, and that's a different environment. Heart St. Vincent's, I visited one of their group homes recently where they've really built a sort of healing environment through an evidence-based program. So all the providers are trying to do different things, and to a lot of success, but also there are times when things are not safe enough, and we got to continue to deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes like my overall issue with many agencies that contract out. Like, New York City, like most of the work that we do in human services is contracted out. And I think my issue with that, and I know the chair and I have talked a lot about this as it pertains to the crisis management system, but I think that the crux of this can be found in many agencies that contract out their services is that like continuity across agencies. So if one agency is doing this particular evidence-based model on how to ensure that they're decreasing violence or whatever versus another one, like how are we ensuring like if there is truly a best practice model that's working at HSVS, how can we ensure that Forestdale is also, I'm just like naming organizations I know of, like Forestdale is like adopting, this model that has been proven successful. Like the issue that we have had with the CMS system, and now like hearing some of the things you're saying, I'm wondering if this issue, I'm not sure, but like, it's like, yeah, there's a great healing model that, one provider is doing in the community, and then this organization is doing excellent at workforce development. How can we kind of like match these evidence-based models that have been proven successful in a New York City urban environment? And I don't have the answer. And that's the last thing I want to say, just to like violence and staff. I think making sure that staff feel safe is important to the youth and the children feeling safe. And I continue to receive a ton of complaints across various spaces, whether it's residential or Crossroads Horizon or some of the non-secure placement facilities, about like violence and staff not feeling supported around that if an incident occurs. And so I just always like to uplift that. It's important. We care about the young person. We 100%, that is our focal point. But if the people that are not caring for the young people feel safe, I feel like it also impacts, or it could impact, how they interact with young people,
It most definitely does. I thank you for highlighting our staff. I'm often on the phone with them if there is an incident, and I'm certainly on the phone with our labor partners to work through, to problem solve around it, to see what they're seeing. our staff are extraordinary and they put themselves in difficult situations. I do want to make a distinction between the foster care population and the juvenile justice population. I think for the young people in the foster care population, we also are really seeking support from the Office of Mental Health at the state level. We're meeting with them because some young people have extraordinary needs that aren't, the child welfare system isn't designed to support alone, right? They're our kids, so we got to be there no matter what. I don't want to make Associate Commissioner Cherry come up here, but her team under DC Mendez does a lot of the visiting to residential programs to try to create that consistency. I think that there's a balance between innovation, like things like Fair Futures came up because some agencies raised some money and decided to start to put the pressure on the city to build on that model that we demonstrated was working. So I love innovation from the providers and let it work and then spread. And so some of the Third Thursday work, some of the work we're doing on the preventive side is to try to say, let's talk about what's working out there. Usually you could pick all the models. They have a few fundamental things underneath that if you're implementing well, will help you, but you can't do anything without great staff. And so I appreciate you highlighting them. I'm always concerned when staff gets hurt and making sure that we are being responsive, not only in the incident, but to try to prevent them going forward. We have seen incidents come down at Horizon and Crossroads despite a significant uptick in the population, but we are nowhere near where we want to be.
Yeah, and I appreciate that distinction. I know that the population and like foster care is like different, so I do appreciate that, and I didn't mean to conflate the populations at all. I was just thinking about like staff. Yes, I was just thinking about staff and violence. And so this is like my last question. So do you have a mechanism? I know you like come from that space, which is like why you're so valuable, but is there currently a mechanism to sort of look at the innovation coming from providers and figure out how to scale across the agency? Like, do you have a system, or is it just you being just and anecdotally looking at like, is there an official system where you're like, oh, we see that this has been working through our conversations with providers, and like maybe this is something we want to scale again across the agency? Yeah,
yes and no. It's certain on the yes side. When we see providers doing well, let's say in permanency, we have them give a presentation to the rest of the providers. Same thing on engagement and preventive services. DC Linares will have them come give a presentation so people can learn from that. I think recently we had a presentation for the Center for Family Life. On the no side, where I think we can do better is, I think providers aren't convinced that we will be nimble enough to sort of move budgets around, change contract language to make sure that they can do those innovations with our support, not just with private support. And so with Dr. Charles and Kafka, I think we're starting to work towards that process and to make sure that our processes are nimble enough, not only to get paid on time, but also to make sure that if we want to modify a budget and it's within the contract and it's legal, we should be able to do that and do it quickly.
I appreciate that. Thank you for answering questions, and thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councilmember.
Thank you so much. Back to our regular scheduled programming. And just to kind of like piggyback off some of first of all, I would like to acknowledge Councilmember Williams here today. I didn't do that for the record, so she's here. But just thinking about staff too, and the extraordinary work that they are doing, and it is a lot. I mean, you used to be a provider. I used to be a provider, literally in the trenches. What I know with all the innovations you're bringing, what are you doing around self-care for staff? Because we know that a lot of times we do this work so thanklessly and we forget about ourselves. So I think that as you're implementing things, I would love to hear what are you doing around self-care for the agency, and like even with providers, what does that look like to hold them accountable to also do self-care? Because sometimes even with the staff, they are burnt out, which sometimes lead to things escalating in situations. Listen, I've been there, so I'm just how are you shifting the culture in that? I mean, the culture and climate in that way as well.
Yeah, starting at ACS, and then I think we can do a better job engaging the providers and how to do that well, and a lot of them are doing it well, but just in how we can be supportive of that. We survey our staff at ACS, and what we learned a couple years ago was Staff could see how their job was consistent with the mission and vision of the agency. They felt like their supervisors were knowledgeable. They felt like they were responsive, but about less than half felt what I'll say is seen, right? Appreciated specifically for their contributions. And so we've tried to really go about making sure that all of us have different events, different ways in which we have CPS Appreciation Week, but then we try to bring it all year round to make sure that folks hear what we're saying. I think it also is about the culture when something goes right and something goes wrong, that we're really trying to build a learning culture, that this is a place you can grow. Staff who see themselves in a growth trajectory, all the literature says, like, they can tolerate a lot more challenge because they feel like they're growing rather than just getting stuck. I think it's responsiveness when things don't go right, when there are safety issues. Sometimes that happens for a case planner at an agency or CPS. I think also, obviously, we've got things like healing circles where folks can come, but also going out to express appreciation directly to staff. And that they know, my perspective on this work and being the leader of ACS is if staff make a decision and I delegated that decision, then we made it together. I'm not coming to actually, we might need to learn from it. We might need to do something different. We might need to make sure, but if they did their level best and made a good, solid decision, even if it wasn't perfect, we're together gonna learn from that as a system. And I think that's how I'm trying to create the learning culture. We have an extraordinary team of cabinet members, many of whom you've met, who are building that in each of their areas. And I know the providers, especially during COVID, figured out a lot of things, group work that they're doing with their staff, ways in which they're making them feel appreciated. We can always do more. I think surveys and those kinds of things are deeply important so you get the actual data of what people are experiencing. So I'll pause there with that, but it's such a hard job. Every one of these jobs.
Yeah, it's not an easy job. Listen, I worked with kids for 20 years. It's not easy. And so, and even there's moments where it was like, you need to take a day because you just experienced something really bad it's hard. So it definitely is something that we do need to keep in the forefront of making sure that self-care is part of the process while we are rolling things out, because burnout is real and we don't want to lose good people. And we often do because we already don't pay them anything. And so they're already doing this for the love. So we also got to think about how we also just keep people sane as well. I know you mentioned before that there are about 25 placement providers. You don't have to do it now. If you can get us a list of all those providers so we can have it in one place.
We have it for you.
An ACS 5-year strategic plan, it says one of its priorities to ensure that adequate family-based placements for children with complex medical, developmental, or sibling-related needs. What efforts are underway to improve the recruitment and retention of high-quality foster care parents, particularly for older youth and children with special needs?
DC Mendez is going to start.
Thank you for that question. So we have at ACS, as you know, our 5-year plan, and we want to meet the need, which means we want to build the capacity to care for children in family-based programs and in residential care. Regarding the family-based side, we have a team, the Office of Foster Parent Recruitment and Support. They work with providers because the agencies are doing the recruitment, they're doing the certification, the training, and the support. But we're working, so speaking to Councilmember Williams' conversation about best practices, they have all of this information. They actually have a curriculum. And using data, they tune it towards each agency because not all agencies are equal and they're not all in the same place. And it really talks to them about how you're engaging when someone calls and says, I want to be a foster parent. What's the time to orientation? What's the time to training? How are you supporting people through that process? So, and we want agencies to have targeted, be very intentional. We did a scan across the country and we noticed that some states are very, they articulate we need homes for teens, we need homes for sibling groups, and we need homes for children that have complex needs because that's what our data shares. So foster parents that's part of the education process. So we understand starting out, maybe you take one child, but over time, you'll feel more comfortable taking a sibling group or taking an older youth. So that's like how our approach is. So the team at ACS works with the agencies, and depending on where the agencies are in their practice, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's a call, maybe it's regular meetings. We also bring everyone together. We often share best practices, and we have agencies present, this is how we leverage social media. This is how we're helping foster parents to talk to their network, their family, their friends, because the data showed that maybe going to a street fair with a table doesn't really bring in as many foster parents as if I'm a foster parent and I talk to you, or you and you. That might get more interest because people can see, oh, I see how they're doing that. So those are some of the efforts. Part of the budget, as we talked about, talks about how your foster parent recruitment and support innovation. So there's dedicated funds, and agencies develop a plan on how they're going to use those funds so that they're very intentional about recruitment.
There are also 5 agencies who are dedicated, who have special medical programs for young people who have, of any age, who have complex medical needs. And so there's a few hundred young people. We expanded that in the most recent contracts. And so those agencies are building up. And again, we are moving contract dollars and capacity around based on, and we did that recently within that continuum, because some agencies were able to recruit more. You know, as DC Mendez is saying, there's no better recruiter than a satisfied foster parent, right? And so
what happens when you have foster parents who feel like they've been discriminated and now, you know, they're at a place where they feel like an agency isn't working with them? Because that also can have the same effects as a good word of mouth when we have foster parents who've had negative experiences.
Absolutely. So foster parents need to be responded to. They need to be, whether that's in the middle of the night or whatever services that they need for children in their home, in the area where a young person is removed from a foster home. ACS has an independent review process, and then there's also a fair hearing process at the state level. But the core of this, right, is having foster parent councils where staff are listening to the experience of foster parents. Being a foster parent is complex for a lot of reasons. We're deeply grateful to all the New Yorkers that step up to do it. You not only have to care for a child who's gone through a lot early in their life, you also are making sure that they're getting to visits and appointments, and it's logistically challenging. And so you give up the power over whether that child's going to be in your home for a long time as your child forever, as an adopted child, or for a short time. And so we are grateful for the sacrifice that foster parents make. Each agency needs to be able to have those systems. DC Mendez's team helps them, support them on that. But ultimately, we also need to make sure that the contracts are moving to where the providers are demonstrating where foster parents are voting with their feet to go. And if they're not going to go to a particular provider because they have a bad reputation, well, then the provider needs to work on that. Obviously, we have our corrective action tools as well. We don't ever want to get to that point, but it needs to be a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, because I know that we actually have a couple who's going to testify later here who was told specifically that the agency was not interested in doing some work with them because they were a same-sex couple, and there was a lot of issues around that. And so I'm trying, and I know we had a hearing back in September around how we're trying to recruit more same-sex couples to be a part of this because we have such a high number of LGBTQ, especially in the RHY system, and trying to connect the gaps. And this family, I think, and they're still fighting to try to get the young people back, but was told that they're no longer going to be able to be foster parents, I guess, with that agency, and I'll make sure I'll connect you guys at the end. But is that something that's normal? And then how do we put in safety nets so things like this does not happen? Because I believe there was a couple of they put in complaints and everything was unfounded, but now they're still saying that they can't be foster parents anymore. And just in a system where we know that it is such a hard job and it's not how to become a foster parent, and we have people who are fighting to keep this right, what could we do to kind of protect this, or how should folks be, knocking this up? Because I say this all the time, incidents often are just us putting flashlight on things that are happening in the dark. And, for me, I don't want to lose good foster care parents that's in the system who want to do good, and lose them because, issues with agencies or providers, not agencies, providers.
We agree with you wholeheartedly. while I can't speak to individual instances, especially those that are ongoing and being evaluated, let me describe some of the processes. So, and let me back up and say, we absolutely not only welcome, encourage, want LGBTQ foster parents in our system for the reasons that you articulated, and also because anyone who is going to give a loving home to a child and support them and provide them stability and care, we want in our system. There are times when a child makes an allegation, someone else makes an allegation. We have a dedicated office of our Office of Special Investigations within our Child Protection that does this, that does evaluations, assessments, investigations of those allegations. They include talking to, going into the home, talking to the children, talking to collateral contacts. That could be a child advocacy center. They make a determination. As you know, council member, the standard of evidence is that it is the preponderance of evidence. And so there are times where the situation is not entirely clear, but there are concerns. And the agencies do have the delegation of case management, do have the authority to change a child's placement if they think that there's something that's not right. That authority is overseen by that Office of Special Investigations as well. So there's an independent review. If the parents feel like that authority by the agency has been abused, then they get an independent review. The independent review makes a decision about whether or not that was an appropriately made decision. If the foster parents are not satisfied with the independent review, then they can pursue a fair hearing outside of ACS with the state that looks at whether we made the appropriate judgment, both in the independent review and in that initial, that the agency made the right decision. Beyond that, because there are situations that are not entirely clear, one of the things that sometimes we have to live with as a system, as we're trying to continue to gather more information, is situations where we're hearing multiple things from different sources, from the children, from different parents, et cetera. So we're trying to wade through that and make the best decision possible in every instance. It should never be, at the same time I say all that, it should never be that any decision is made other than with what's in the best interest of the child. And so we've heard some of the concerns that you reference. We're also engaged in a process with the agency that is involved here to make sure that if there is anything playing out there, that we get beneath it, and sort of on a more systemic level throughout the agency, and to make sure we really understand everything that's going on here, because it's not okay to any of us that a family that is LGBTQ doesn't feel safe. In fact, under Commissioner Carrion, we're the first city in the country to require that all foster parents attest that they are affirming. And so this is work that's been going on for a long time, and we're not gonna step away from it now.
Yeah, we had a whole hearing on it in September, and so I understand the commitment, and I feel like you guys also have been working really hard around that, and so definitely want to make sure that we are highlighting the changes and issues that we are doing, but also want to make sure we're holding everybody to those standards, right? I think again sometimes it gets really hard with what we might want and how is that trickling out and playing in other places.
Absolutely.
So according to the FY 2025 PMMR, the percentage of children placed with relatives has declined from 48.9% to 44.2% due to the part in the increase of number of teens entering care, many from outside New York City with limited local family resources. Why does ACS believe they are seeing this rise in teenage entering from outside of city, and what steps is the agency taking to find placement for those groups?
Yeah. So we are, first of all, just that number on the KIN is initial placement into care. We continue to see strong results because the agencies continue to work on this. Even after a child's placed, they're talking to the child, they're searching for KIN. And so we've gone from the low 30s to about 44% in care, 45% in care that are placed with close relatives or friends. We did see an uptick. Some of this has to do with the destitute children that we mentioned earlier with Councilmember Brewer, that's from two sources, some that are new to the country or to the city. There's also been some work that we've been doing with the runaway and homeless youth
Yes.
shelters, and so we are trying to be responsive to young people who are coming in, and so I think those two sources. There's also, we talked earlier about CARES and the questions around youth. We want to make sure everyone's connected to preventive services when appropriate. We are finding placements for young people coming in this situation. Last year, on any given day, we averaged about 74 young people at the Children's Center. Today, we're at 64, and we're seeing kids get more placements right now. We have a lower level of longer stayers than we typically do. So the team is working really hard with providers and to make sure that the whole panoply of placement options is being used. And I'm proud that we have been able to continue to reduce the use of residential care even with this increase. It's not a huge increase, but it's an important one that affected the kin numbers.
In ACS 5-year strategic plan, it says regular childcare assessments will be conducted to identify strengths, treatment needs, and readiness for stable placement. How frequently are child assessments conducted, and what measures are in place to ensure that assessment results are effectively used to inform service provisions and permanency planning?
Thank you for your question. So with our new contracts, we launched a program called Enhanced Family Foster Care, and that was a blending of two programs that were in operation previously, regular families foster care and therapeutic family foster care. We created one model because we recognize that as a child is in foster care, their needs change and they fluctuate over time. And what was happening in the past was that children would either need to move to another home or sometimes to another agency if they didn't have that therapeutic program. So with Enhanced Family Foster Care, all foster parents are therapeutically trained. The staff also receive the training. And part of that model is to have treatment team meetings, and that can happen every 3 to 6 months, or when something happens with a case. If maybe the child goes AWOC, you would come back and have a treatment team meeting. The information from that meeting is then what is used to inform the service plan. That is part of the FAST, which is required as also, which is done at least twice a year, but it can be done more often, again, depending on what's going on with the case. We have a team at ACS that does regular reviews, random sample reviews. It's called PAMS, but I can't think of the acronym right now. I'll get it to you. But they look at cases, they look at the quality of the FAST. So this is how we are looking at, so they're looking at the case dynamics and the progress notes. What is in the FAST? What are the services that are being recommended? We also have a permanency hearing. The family court is reviewing the service plan and the progress of the child and the parent, because the FAST covers both the parent and the child. So that's how we kind of monitor internally what they're doing as the model is designed.
And there's also, at the initial placement, there's assessments that happen at the Children's Center and in other settings to make sure we understand all the needs of the children at that moment.
According to the FY 2025 PMR, the number of children moving from one foster family to another increased 1.3 to 1.4 per 100 care days. ACS attribute those moves to the need for better matches between foster children and families. What specific strategies and improvements is ACS implementing to ensure that foster care family matching process and reducing placement disruptions, ensuring that children are placed with the most stable foster family from the outset? And this also came up last year when we had Shadow Day in Chambers. As you guys know, we host Shadow Day here for foster care youth, the best time of the year. And we're in the process of planning that now. But we had one dynamic young person who came in who had a list of legislation. And I spoke about this in our hearing in September. But one of the issues she had was she felt like she was put with a very strict religious family, and she was LGBTQ. And she just was like, it was just not a good match. And so how are we looking to kind of make sure that those things are matching up and lining up so that young people aren't disrupted less often?
Thank you for that, Councilmember. It's deeply important. After young people have been removed from their homes, they shouldn't be bounced around the foster care system. The numbers that you cite are per 1,000 care days, so about 88% of the young people in care were stable last year. At the onset of, especially for teens, There's a process of assessment. Often there's a meet and greet between potential foster parents and that young person. They both can decide whether that's an appropriate match for them. We try to keep those to be very normal, maybe having a foster parent visit or having them go for a weekend or do an activity together as best we can, because we don't want this to be a situation where young people feel like they're being selected, but we want to give them a voice in that process. They speak obviously on the kin side with the CPS, talk about where they might be comfortable within their family network, and then during that assessment process, if that is not an option at that moment, they get to articulate what kind of home they would like, sometimes whether there's other ages of kids. There are times where there are behavioral behaviors that are assessed that we want to make sure that they are in maybe a foster home that can dedicate their entire selves to that one child. This is constant work. I think the other piece of this is when something, where there is a sort of a conflict in the relationship, and as you may know, teenagers and parents often have conflict, that we are trying to bring solutions to bear there and not just saying, all right, someone's upset and we're going to move the child. So we have something called a placement preservation conference, and so everyone comes together to try to say, how can we support you here? What's the core issue? Sometimes it's around curfew. Sometimes it's around you don't want me hanging out with this person. Sometimes it's right you don't have the right food. And so to try to manage that, most often that is successful. I'm not satisfied with 1.4 or any, I think every child really should be stable in care. So we're going to keep at it.
No, thank you. I think it's definitely something we could all be working on and thinking about. And even when I'm thinking about recruiting, how do we all work to do more recruitment for positive foster parents?
Absolutely.
I have some ideas, so let's check in about it later.
Great.
I think we should host something at the council about foster care parents and
Love it.
foster care parent day. How does one of ACS stated goals to ensure that timely placement for youth in foster care? How does ACS define timely, and what benchmarks are used to measure that success?
So we don't have a specific timely placement number, but we look at the percentage of young people going directly to kin care. We're working with a group called Axon Research to really help us understand that initial placement. So we look at metrics like when you are placed with a kin home, how long does it take you to get to an agency that is now supporting you, and what is Child Protection doing in that interim period to provide funds and supports. So that's a sort of stream of work. We look at how long children stay at the Children's Center, and so as I mentioned in my testimony, 60% are less than 7 days. And then we look at sort of the long stayer group and what is getting in the way for them. Sometimes in the long stayer group you have not only large sibling groups, but you could have a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old, and that 12-year-old might have special needs. We do prioritize keeping them together. 95+% of our siblings stay together. We never want to separate them if it's at all possible, and we do well on that. So those are some of the metrics that we look at on a monthly basis. Every day we get an update on these metrics, but on a monthly basis we sit down with Action Research and we're developing plans on each of those components. We recently had our CFS, our Child and Family Specialist, support Child Protection in a different way to move the kinship process more seamlessly, because they're doing assessments of the home, they're making sure that the kinship foster parents understand the support that's available to them. So it's a multifaceted process for this as well. We want to see, our goal that we've set for this year is that 55% of children are going directly to kin, and that we're seeing closer to 60 or 65% never touch the Children's Center. We're not there yet, but that's our goal.
And so even when we're thinking about, I know you mentioned earlier that there's like report cards for providers.
Yeah.
And can you talk about some of that accountability? Because one of the things I did hear was like sometimes providers don't like to push adoption because they like to keep them in the system longer because they get additional funding. So could you clear up some of that?
Yeah. So there was a long-standing critique that because foster care agencies were paid per day, that there was sort of a disconnect between timely permanency and the funding mechanism. And I don't think most providers were keeping kids in care longer for that, but I do think it made it harder for them to invest in the timely permanency. The new contracts end that, so they're paid on a program size, and we move budgets based on. So, what I was talking earlier about moving budgets, if a provider's number of children in care is going up, but they're not achieving permanency, we're not giving them more resources. So we're looking both at the permanency, and I think that's part of the reason we're seeing some improvements in reunification. The courts play a huge role here, right? And so,
And no one ever talks about that.
yeah, and it's important. There's due process for parents. There's making sure that we're getting that decision right. That sometimes when surrender can happen and families can have an open adoption, we can pursue that. So we are making sure we actually have slightly fewer adoptions this year over last year, but we have more children who are now on the adoption track than we had the year before, just to make sure that when it's the right decision that we're moving as quickly as possible. We're not satisfied where we are on reunification, any of it. So what we did was, under DC Mendez leadership and my office, we're creating a enhanced permanency review with providers. We're actually selecting cases, going through them, seeing where they're stuck, coming up with solutions there, making sure. Sometimes it's just, did the paperwork get in, right? Did you get the birth certificate? Did you get this? And so that we're moving those processes as quickly as we possibly can. We can always, the court is part of it, but we always have to do our piece of it. What Ina was also mentioning earlier, just on the provider side, there's something called PAMS, Provider Agency Measurement System.
There you go. You got it.
Like created many years
That's why
ago.
you the commissioner.
But that's like case reviews. And so we're looking at our agencies making decisions that are consistent with the case facts. And moving those along. I think the decision around termination of parental rights is a really hard one for agencies and for a judge. And so, there's times where it has to happen. And so we want to support them in that decision making. And this is another place where we're using providers to support one another. There are agencies that have systems, and they're teaching other agencies how to do that. I think by and large, we see in our reunification numbers that agencies are paying attention here and deeply care about giving children permanency, but we can do better.
In the 5-year strategic plan, ACS emphasized the importance of identifying kinship placements for children and young people. How does ACS assess the stability of kinship placements before making a permanent placement decision? Because one of the things that I'm always curious about, and obviously we want to keep families together, and that is always the goal, and that needs to be the priority. But sometimes I'm like, well, these people, we remove them from one traumatic situation and it still might be trauma there. And so then how are we supporting this family around this trauma that might be the reason why these young people ended up in this case, right? So we might move them from the mom and dad, but now they're with grandma, and grandma was the cause of the trauma from the mom that, so it's like all this trauma that sometimes we need to clean up. And obviously we want to keep people with their families, but how are we, and what supports are we giving the families to kind of ensure some of this trauma is cleaned up before we place them there?
Yeah,
and listen, it's not an easy task. That's a lot I just asked.
Yeah, I think anyone who exists within a family knows that there's complications, right? And so I think we talk to young people, obviously the young people who are verbal age, to really understand whether they feel safe there and whether we talk to parents in that early stage. To make sure we reduce the time, the initial assessment is pretty short, right? It's a clearance around criminal background, SCR, State Central Registry, and around the home. And sometimes there's something that comes up in the State Central Registry that's 30 years old, and then that has to get ratcheted up, and our managers are empowered to waive certain rules under the state law so that we can maximize that. During that process, we found gaps in the support to the kinship providers. This is why we had the other unit of social workers, not just CPS, so our child and family specialists, which is a separate title. They are now going out to support those kinship foster parents. making sure that not only they're going through the process to get connected to an agency, but they know what's available medically, that there's reimbursement for things like getting to school. And I think we're seeing improvements there because of that additional support. We do have a parent-to-parent meeting, and that's for kinship parents and parents that happens within the first week to talk about, parents want, as an example, their child's hair done a certain way, or want to make sure that they have their teddy bear, like those kinds of things where they can talk about ways in which the co-parenting relationship can be as healthy as possible. We do have mediation that's often available through the court as well, where there's where kinship and families are at sort of loggerheads or are not getting along or need to be able to come to a decision together. And so the court has expanded the availability of that, and we're working with our providers to make sure that they take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard. That was one of the things that I'm always pondering, because I'm like, I know we are focused on keeping families together and kinship, but sometimes there's just so much trauma there, and like it's so much uncover. But they're not given like any like support around like therapeutic services for them or counseling, or do they have folks that are obviously you have a case manager who's come to assessments, but like stuff to support the adult and not just the young person? Is that available as well?
Yes, absolutely. We have some services that are around early attachment that are available. There's certainly therapeutic services for families that we can get access to. There's definitely therapeutic services for children. I think I should note that the stability amongst kinship caregivers is higher than non-kinship caregivers. And so we are working through this process most often to provide stability for kids. But yes, those services are available. As I mentioned OMH earlier, the availability of mental health services generally is difficult. So I don't want to paint a picture that's perfectly rosy there.
Yeah, it's a shortage, across the city. But it's just one of those things that has been really like pressing to me of like, some of these people are toxic. Are we sending them back to toxic research? All right. What post-recertification support does ACS provide to ensure that families remain stable and successful after reunification? And are there specific programs or services in place to prevent reentry into the foster care system?
So we're pleased that reentry is down, even with reunifications being up. It's a little over 7%, and so the 90+% of families are remaining reunified. We have a child discharge period where services are provided. Many of the behavioral health and medical services, now that children in foster care went into managed care, the year after reunification, providers are able to continue those services for families after. To be perfectly frank, there's times where parents want the services from that agency. There's times when they don't want. They're concerned.
I can see why they wouldn't.
They're concerned about the oversight but we provide a whole series. There's also some providers for post-permanency services that are operate throughout the city. The Council on Adoption. Did you want to add anything there?
Not really, but that particular group, they do a lot of work around for families where adoption or kin gap was the permanency option. And so they will provide support, they can provide counseling, therapy. They do a lot of preservation as well, because sometimes it's possible that the adoptive, it's not a placement anymore, but the adoption could disrupt, and they do a lot of work on keeping that family together. And then if it is the best decision that maybe the adoption is not going to work, we have a post-adoption team that can work on supporting that child if they need to come back into care, or if we need to find maybe other adults that can care for them.
There's also about 15 to 20% of reunifying families connect to preventive services. As I said earlier, often they want services from different providers, and we facilitate that as well.
Yeah, I can see probably having a different provider might be helpful, because they're like, they took my kids, I get it. The rate of maltreatment in family foster care more than doubled, increasing from 1.5 to 2.8 per 100 care days. Given the increase in maltreatment rates in family foster care, what additional oversight mechanisms are being implemented to ensure foster care homes are safe?
So that is for the PMMR period, the 4-month period, and so we are still down year over year. Just a few years ago, it was 6 per 100,000 care days, and so this sums up to 98% of foster homes have no indication of maltreatment. Any is not okay. A child's come into care. The vast majority of these are, and there's about 49 children were affected in 2023. I'm not giving 2024, not because I'm hiding it, but because the 60-day period for investigations, but we can get you that number. So we've seen a significant decline. A lot of them are things where there's a situation about did the foster parent take the child to the doctor appropriately or something like that, where there's a neglect situation. In each of those situations, there's a full investigation. We created a new protocol to make sure that we understand, because some of the maltreatment in care is also relates to something happened on a family visit. And so a protocol to make sure all systems, agencies, Office of Special Investigations, Family Permanency are talking together. So much of this, Councilmember, goes back to the recruitment and the support of foster parents, that they're knowledgeable about the services that are available. And so I want to work with you. I love the idea of a day to do some recruitment. You know, we have fewer
You guys
children.
got to put the council members to more work.
All right, you said it. I love it.
Every office should be helping with recruitment. So
Thank you.
that's 51 people
Everyone's business. Yeah.
recruiting good foster parents. I got some ideas. We're going to work together on this.
Wonderful.
I know that Councilmember Brewer kind of spoke about some of the aging out stuff, but I just had a quick question around, can you guys provide any data around how many young people between the ages of 18 to 21 who've been discharged during their discharge period, who've utilized the additional services, who've like come back to either be reinstated or come back to get some of these services?
So we had 10 children re-enter. I think 90 are in that period. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a reduction in children aging out, and we're seeing even a greater reduction in children who sign themselves out. If you're signing yourself out of care, I really worry. We want to make sure you're housed, you have everything that you need, and so I believe it's about 90 young people who are in that category right now.
Correct. There are 90 young people that are working with our supervisions of 21. Just to piggyback, there were 32 re-entry requests. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a meeting, there's a conference, and sometimes even though there may be a request, they can be safely maintained and they don't come back into care. But 10 young people did.
And we do, if you're in that category, you're eligible for all the housing support. So Anthos, Fair Futures, all of that that's what we're trying to engage them in, to make sure that they know that they can either come back to care. In some of those conferences, they say, I really just want housing support, and then they'll work with our housing unit.
An ACS 5-year strategic plan states that FY 2024 residential care contracts include workforce enhancements to support payment equity, staff recruitment, and stability, as well as the revised payment structure that provided great flexibility to cover fixed costs. Because we did not ask for the enhancement, but I'm not gonna go there. What was has been the response from providers to the workforce enhancement and the revised payment structure? Because I've heard like different things from different providers on obviously it wasn't meant to be a COLA, and so it wasn't necessary. Everyone didn't get it, and it's been different structures. So I'm just trying to hear what feedback have you heard around that?
So a lot of good feedback. I think the providers are grateful for the enhancements around youth supports and housing.
They're not grateful. They should get it anyway. So I'm just gonna speak for them.
Okay. Well, they've said different to me, but
You're not grateful. You used to be a provider too.
I'm gonna get to the other side of it. So it's been around that. Providers are happy to be able to provide supports to young people that weren't there in the past. I think, as you said, each provider has sort of structured it differently. The COLA has come from the state budget, so they're advocating right now for additional investment in that workforce, which I certainly support. We've also heard on the flip side that the money might not be in the exact right spot for what their priorities are, what their needs are. And so this is where we want to hear from the providers around particular budget modifications that they think make sense. There's a significant amount that goes into a residential care placement, well over, when you add it all together, it's typically well over $1,000 a day. And so if it's not in the right spots, we have to move that around. For example, each provider has money for a evidence-based model. They might want to choose a model that has a promising practice, or you don't have to fly to that particular place to get trained in it and save some money there and invest it in their workforce. We want to be open to that. They might be providing their therapist one rate, but their childcare staff something else, and they want to change that. Obviously, more resources for all of the staff, I think, is key. And so that's some of the feedback that we've gotten, and the flexibility we want to provide.
Yeah, we're gonna keep fighting to make sure that there's equity. So thank you for that. The parent empowerment, parents PEP program embeds parent advocates in each case planning unit. Parent advocates are individual lived experience of the child welfare system who have successfully addressed the issues that brought their family to attention of the system. What specific training do parent advocates receive to ensure they can effectively support families navigating the child welfare system? Because I met with a group early on around how they wanted to see more of this happening in not just in some of these meetings, but seeing this being embodied and embedded more into all aspects of program, of having more people with lived experience in this. Absolutely. And so I would love to just hear what specific trainings are you guys giving these parents? What does that look like? What does the compensation look like? Is this a stipend program? Are people on payroll? So we'd just love to hear more about this.
Yeah, DC Mendez really made this happen, so I'll let her speak to most of it. It is a full-time salaried position with benefits. The range is typically somewhere around $40,000 for salary, so something to look at there. We have 75 of the 150 budgeted positions on. This is a program that's been growing recently, and we actually
So how many?
75. There's 150 budgeted positions, but we don't want to rush that. This is a population that has particular experience, and we want to make sure that they have the training and the support of the agencies. So I'll ask DC Mendez to talk about the work they're doing around the training and the cultural support at the agencies.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the question. So the Parents Empowering Parents program started actually as a pilot in 2020 with 2 agencies. They had about 9 parent advocates, and they were working with just a handful of units. We co-partnered and co-designed the model with the agencies that were involved, and also RISE. RISE does all of the training. So the training talks about what is a parent advocate. They have a RISE 90-day practice model, so it really talks about what does the life of a case look like. And so the parent advocates get that training. There's also a support group component as part of the training piece. That's for the advocates. Prior to rolling out, one of the things we learned in the pilot was we can't just say, here, do a parent advocate program. We need to have a culture shift. So there are modules that were developed in training so that the case planner, the supervisor, the program director will have an understanding of how this parent voice is important, how to embed it in the case planning unit, and how we can all work together, how we can debunk myths, how can we trust the parent advocate, how can we now have this lens that can inform case planning. We have a team that specifically works with the agencies on the development of the Parent Empowering Parent model. And so it's an ongoing thing. It launched, it's new, we're at about 75, we want to get to 150. Like every other social service role, there's turnover, so you hire a parent advocate and maybe they move on. But we really are embracing this model. We believe parent voice, youth voice is extremely important if we want to make those shifts.
Is this part of a contract?
Yes.
Is
So
this part of the contract?
all EFFC units. So a unit is usually 4 case planners and a supervisor. The goal is every unit will have a parent advocate.
What does recruitment for that look like?
So we partner with Rise Again and other organizations, and they hold job fairs to kind of explain what the role is, what's the process.
I mean, because that's a really specific niche.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, that's why Rise has been terrific because they do so much of the advocacy with parents, and so they have a contingency of folks who have been doing this work in different places. A lot of folks who are connected to Rise are also parent advocates at a variety of places, like the parent defender organizations, and so they come together not only for parent advocates that are going to be placed within the foster care system or the preventive system, but sort of more broadly, and they've been doing an amazing job in it.
and do you have a similar thing with young people? I know we have like the youth advisory boards and those things, but would this be something that you want to see also with like young people who've had like lived experiences being part of like case management as well as young people are transitioning out? And is that something or part of like on your list of 6 billion things that you're already working on?
I think it'd be wonderful. I think there's a few things that are happening that are important in this. We do it through SYP. We do a lot of summer internship programs, young people at the agency doing lots of projects, but also helping us. Each agency, many of them have youth advocates on board. We work with the youth advocacy committees that I was mentioning earlier. In addition, we're following closely some of the work that the Brave Hearts are doing. They're an organization, they're actually connected in the FEC in your district. They are also connected with Children's Village. OCFS just started something that I think has a lot of promise, and we're looking at whether we could support it, which is a hotline for young people in foster care, statewide. And so the Brave Hearts staff it, so they are young people who have been in care, some in the juvenile justice system, some in the foster care system. They staff it, they respond, they get young people to the support that they need. It's just launching, and so we're meeting with them regularly to understand their success, and I'd also like to see, if at all possible, we could find some resources for that kind of both centralized support, but at the agencies as well.
And this is like a phone number where so they would call.
Yeah.
We got to get an app too, because no one talks on the phone anymore. These kids don't want to talk, so we got to get an app where they can have live chats with them as well.
They may. It's also text that's available through that, I believe.
So they can do text too. You
Yeah.
know, they don't want to talk to nobody. They want to text you. So
Yeah, let me triple check before I
I mean,
say
we're
for
kind of
sure, but I
old
think
and
they
dating
do.
ourselves, but you know. I just have a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. One of, I know Councilman Brewer also talked about this, was just around like the busing and the issues around busing. And one of the things that we've seen that like DOV providers provide per paid ride, share ride services, which is only available after a 10-day waiting period for a school bus. Students in foster care still require a chaperone to accompany them. This especially becomes challenging for foster parents with multiple children in the home. To reduce the finance and logistical staffing burden on agencies, would ACS contract with a prepaid service with vetted drivers that does not require a chaperone?
We'd definitely be able to look into it. We've looked into it in the past, and there's been sort of staffing challenges in having sort of enough that would actually cover the need. We've talked to the Department of Education, New York State Public Schools, that has some of these contracts. The agreement we made with them last year was to create this reimbursement pathway for those 10 days. So for chaperoning, for the actual transportation itself. As I was mentioning earlier, we got the most recent data from them, and there's been some substantial reimbursements, 100,000 plus at some agencies, but not all of them are taking advantage of it. And so we've got to double back and make sure they understand how to navigate that process. But we'd be happy to take a look at additional solutions here, because it is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, I mean, this is one of the things we were yelling at the DOE hearing, just around like, if we look at the amount that we're paying on contracting, we can just bring it back and hire our own drivers and do it ourselves with insurance. But we don't want to look at that, because that would actually help with some of this stuff and some of these issues. But that's not your fight, that's DOE's fight. But you know, whatever, I'm just another suggestion. Advocates have shared that ACS to provide direct transportation, such as car and van with chaperones, to students in foster care. Is this something that you can get from schools while waiting for the bus? That 10-day waiting period, and have those services been discontinued?
As far as we could tell, this only was happening at the Children's Center and in very sort of some places related to residential care. So, love to learn more. We'll reach out to Kafka to understand.
Yeah, this was
what those are.
actually, these questions are actually directly from providers.
Okay.
So they were bringing it. So we'll definitely make sure we'll follow up and we can
Great.
get you instances
Thank you.
that you have as well. The next question and final questions are just around like insurance and liability. This is another thing that came up when we were meeting with providers. The rising cost of general liability and sexual molestation liability insurance is affected providers nationwide. Last year, nonprofit insurance alliances of California announced it would not be renewing coverage in California for foster care agency. How is ACS working with foster care agencies facing this financial pressure, and has ACS explored any strategies such as pooled insurance options, advocacy at the state level for funding assistance, or policy changes to help mitigate the burden on providers?
Yeah, this is a hugely important issue, and providers cannot operate without insurance in our space, and for very good reasons. And the California example is one that we're watching closely and are very concerned about. We have not seen providers not be able to access care yet here, but we're hearing that there are several who are concerned as they enter into negotiations for insurance. We have been advocating at the state level to make sure that they understand the issues here, including directly with the governor's office. They seem to be quite engaged on it. I understand that the state health insurance leadership has recently acknowledged to Kafka that they are focused on this and concerned. It really does need to be at the sort of the broadest level, a statewide solution, because so many of the levers around insurance, the statewide health insurance fund, et cetera, but also providers operate beyond the city borders, and so they have to have umbrella coverage that. What we're doing, in addition to the advocacy, is just working with any provider to say if they're coming to us, if it means that they have to spend a little bit more money and need a budget modification, or we need to cover it, this is essential. We need to make sure we have it. And so we've put the word out that any provider that is in negotiations that they're worried they're not going to be able to cover, to let us know. We'll work with them to try to figure out a pathway here. But we really do absolutely need a statewide solution. Kafka's been, sounding this bell. Some of it relates to the Child Victims Act. There's some ongoing court cases that are critical here. So it's a complex situation, but the bottom line is they have to be able to access insurance.
Yeah. I would love to make sure that we're working together on the advocacy at the state level. I was just up there not only this weekend, but the week before doing some advocacy. And so especially let's figure out how to do that more collaboratively.
Wonderful.
Because I think that insurance is not just an issue in this space, but in a lot of spaces. And it's not a sexy topic, so I don't think people want to lead with that, but it is necessary. And so a lot of programs will lose contracts and funding because they're not able to get insured. So we definitely have to figure out solutions before we get to a place where it's dire.
And I'll add, as you know, Councilmember, the agencies that provide foster care in New York City also provide billions of dollars of other services through every system. So this is an important issue for the whole sector.
Yeah, because everything is interrelated, but sometimes we people don't realize how interrelated it is. So definitely want to work with you on that as well. But with that, I am done with my questioning.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate your expertise and always being so open and honest. And with that, I'm going to take a quick 5-minute recess.
Thank you, Councilmember.
I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a formal government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public must remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recordings or photography will be allowed at the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present video or audio as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant at Arms at the conclusion of their hearing. If you wish to speak today, at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant of Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's topic. And I mean, we will be staying on topic, evaluating New York City foster care system. If you have written testimony or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of the testimony to the Sergeant at Arms. I will now call the first panel. Fidel DeCastro, is that right? DeCastro, and I'm sorry if I mess up your name. Everson Ledson, Lynn, Lamate, I'm sorry. I am sorry that I'm butchering people's name, I apologize. And Dr. Charles. Yes. And you can put the other chair at the end so they don't have to be on top of each other. And please.
Good afternoon. My name is Fernando Cantelli de Castro, and my story highlights how ACS fails to support foster children and families. For almost 3 years, my husband and I put all of our energy into caring for 2 small children. But we want to tell their story, protecting their privacy, because privacy cannot be used as an excuse to cover up a systemic failure that continues unchecked. We were fully committed to kids returning to their parents. See this picture? It's us with their mother and our foster daughter's graduation 15 months after the kids came into care. And they were placed with us. On that days, we were hopeful for reunification, but just 4 hours after this picture was taken, the kids came home terrorized. Our foster daughter told us that during a supervised visit at the foster care agency, she was forced to talk to the aggressor, the person who had a restraining order from her. She had nightmares, and we told the caseworker, but she strongly denied it ever happened and told us to not report it to the kid's lawyer. She even said our foster daughter was lying. Weeks after this picture, it was proven that this cause had happened. On January 17th, after kids had been in care for 33 months, we spoke with Dan Hauser and Denise, and he suggested that the problem in our case was ineffective communication and co-parenting, and that the focus should be instead be on listening to birth parents' voices and understanding that they believe in the best interest of the children. By that, does he mean watching us, the kids, get re-victimized over and over again without saying anything about it? And let me be clear about who is failing in our case. It is SCO, Family of Services, and ACS. They would not approve the kids' vouchers. They did not follow restraining orders. They did not provide insurance cards for the kids for 5 months, and they did not have a medical team for a year. And now they're not making sure the kids go to school every day. On multiple occasions, we tried to report mismanagement, homophobia to this office that the commissioner mentioned, advocacy, but their response was always the same. If we didn't like it, just give the kids back and change the agency. We're committed to these beautiful, smart, creative, beautiful children. And ACS Commissioner Dan Hauser can try to humiliate us with more and more investigations, but our commitment goes far beyond his tenure. I'm about to finish. Many people usually tell us, oh my God, these kids are so lucky to have you because you are fighting for them. No. I'm very lucky to have taken care of them, but no child safety in this city should depend on luck. Thank you.
Greetings to the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. I am Lynette LaMadrid, a member of the Parent Council at the Children's Village. We provide one of the broadest continuums of programming in New York with an emphasis on trauma-informed and family-based community programming to keep at-risk youth safe at home with families and to reunite youth with their families after placement. We hear so much about family values. How about investing in families? I came to the Children's Village after many years of trying to heal my family and help my son. There was a time for like 2 years in a row, I'd leave the doors open between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. because if the cops were going to tell me my son was dead, I wanted to see them coming. I chose Children's Village because I had never heard from it before. I am grateful for the time my family had there. Staff retention was high and had great people working with us. I made Wednesday dates with my son, and through Children's Village, we found the two best foster dads I could ever ask for, ever. These dads still are part of my family. Now, I was lucky. Some parents aren't. We're at a time when we need more funding to keep staff. Families are only good as the people pouring into us. Family are only good as strong as the people who help us through. But when you take an angry, untrusting child, tell them to trust, and then their worker has to leave in a few months, and not by choice, but because they cannot pay their own bills and they need to feed their own kids, it disrupts everything. I have had great workers, and I've seen great workers at the Children's Village. It took and I've seen how hard it is when families lose those connections. It took my son a while to get right. We didn't just stop at he messed up in a few places. What I'm asking for, today he's 26 and he has a family of his own, but if you take the same services, you take my grandson's mother, she was left at a police station as a child, placed in numerous foster homes, and never received the services she needed. As a result, she's left two of her children. My grandson has felt abandoned and deeply hurt. If we invest in preventive services in family and staff, we are ultimately investing in children. I've been part of the Children's Village Parent Council for 10 years. I believe in this work. I believe in paying forward the blessings my family has. I believe in investing in families. I believe in hearing in families. I believe certain times, like they gave back my grandson. I had my grandson for a little bit. They gave him back to the mother. And the mother, again, just dropped them off. And I get it. I get she needs services too. That's what I'm also fighting for as well. But I also urge you to listen to us, the people that take care of the children, that you drop the children, give the children to, because we matter and we should also be heard. I urge the city council to invest in policies and programs that uplift families rather than break them apart, but also listen to all families, not just the biological ones. Foster care should be the last result, not the first response, but also listen to the foster parents. When more investment in prevention, family preservation services, foster parents, equitable support, we can build a system that truly serves the best interests of children and families. Thank you for your time and your patience. Here, I will switch seats with you.
Okay. My name is Everson Latson. I'm Fernando's husband. I want to talk about a chilling message that ACS is sending to foster families as well as their contracted agencies. They're telling foster families in New York City, advocate for your child and you'll be punished. In our case, the pattern could not have been more clear. When we told the legal advocate and the court about their contractor's refusal to provide services and violations of court orders, allegations were made 3 hours later. When those were dismissed, the agency resubmitted them. When we reported strange men coming and going at visits and an injury that our foster child sustained at a supervised visit, allegations were made days later. In fact, our foster children's advocate successfully removed the caseworker from their case because she was putting the children in danger. When SEO saw in the children's lawyer's petition that we were among her sources, they removed the children without warning 3 days later. Now, that sudden removal was after 2.5 years of attachment between the children and us. Like the others, all of these allegations were investigated and unfounded. In fact, we remain in the 98% of foster parents that Commissioner Dan Hauser mentioned with no founded allegations. When the agency learned that we won the appeal, they refused to return the children to our home and instead submitted the same allegations for a second time within 24 hours. Those two were investigated and unfounded. But this time, ACS's leadership went with their contractor and against their own investigators. Despite the allegations being cleared, they declined to return the children to the home that they had known for 2.5 years, specifically citing a report that the contractor put together claiming that the children were inappropriately exposed to sexual content because they had seen my husband and I kiss one another on the lips. ACS has been aware of this particular agency's homophobia for years. We and other LGBTQ foster families that have reached out to us have reported it to them in the past, and they have done nothing. But we were shocked when ACS's leadership and Commissioner Danhauser actively endorsed it. 2 weeks ago, New York One exposed the injustice and, most importantly, the trauma that it has affected on these two children. Hours later, ACS moved the children again to their 6th home in 4 months. The next day, ACS called us, informing us that they were opening another investigation into our home more than 100 days after removing the children, after 2 previous allegations were invested and cleared by them and the NYPD, and right after hearing that the press was coming out. It's shameless. In closing, I ask you to imagine, what does it do to a small child to have 6 sets of parents in 4 months? What does it do to a 6-year-old and to a 3-year-old? I hope that this committee will hold ACS leadership accountable because they are not just failing these children, they are actively harming them.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Sophine Charles, the Associate Executive Director for the Council of Family and Child Caring Agencies. We represent more than 100 agencies across New York State. We're a membership organization and advocates for the agencies that provide foster care. I want to, on a high level, lift up 4 important factors as you investigate the foster care system: insurance, staffing, procurement issues, and prevention services. Foster care is sustainable only if we're able to keep our agencies insured and in practice with liability insurance. So as we have this hearing, if we're not able to insure our agencies, then the city will be responsible for assuming direct care of the children that are currently in foster care. And I'd also like to just urge the City Council to work with the Mayor's Office and the State Governor's Office to assist the foster care agencies with accessing insurance and creating a risk pool in order to ensure that agencies can remain in business and insured. I would also urge the City Council to carefully consider the magnitude of all of the changes that have already happened in foster care and through ACS over the many years. We're not there yet, and we haven't covered everything that needs to be covered in order to fully support children and families in foster care. But CAFCA supports all of the reform, and we encourage the City Council to continue funding and creating a pathway for additional child safety enhancements and practices. CAFCA also requests the City Council to elevate the importance of the workforce and the staff and their value in providing foster care services. The investment in salaries, scholarships, and tuition assistance to help agencies sustain a highly trained and credentialed child care workforce. We also encourage actions to reform the current city procurement system. Agencies are not being paid. It's hard for them to provide quality services if the city is not paying them for services already rendered. And we also encourage the City Council to make sure that prevention services and their contracts are getting the true cost of what it costs to conduct services.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Charles. Just to echo some of this stuff, everybody knows I fight really hard to reform this procurement process, but it is years of bureaucracy that we're trying to untangle here, and I'll continue to be a champion to make sure folks are getting paid for the services. And just like I just told the commissioner, definitely want to make sure that we're aligned as we are also going to the state to lobby to make sure that funding is adequate and supported. And, you know, I'll continue to be a champion at the city level. So thank you for that testimony. But I did want to turn I had a few questions for all the parents on the panel today, and just talking about some of the, I guess, disconnect that I've kind of kept mentioning through the hearing around like what's happening at the top and the vision and how it's not necessarily being trickled down. You know, I'm really sorry to hear that you know, you guys are still fighting to get the children back. All of you are fighting to get children back. And one, I want to say thank you, because it is important that we have people continuously fighting for our young people. I'm a fighter as well for our young people, and so it's always really good to see people who are saying, no, we want to do right and to do good by the young people. But I had a question, because in the testimony, Mr. Castro, that you provided, you said that that the agency had you wait 5 months to get, I guess, the medical or insurance cards, because you were trying to provide services. Is that, because that sounds a bit strange. Why wasn't that given to you when you got the children? Why would you have to wait 5 months? Did they give you a reason for this?
So the system is so messy that when the kids were removed from their parents, they didn't have our phone number correct. So the kids stayed in a shelter for a whole weekend. And they called us on a Monday and say, how are the kids? And we're like, what kids? We don't have them at home. So it took them 5 months to provide Medicaid healthcare insurances. And each one was different and complicated. But at the same time, the agency lost the only doctor they had. So they didn't have medical service in the agency, and they didn't have healthcare insurance cards. We had a letter that said that all the costs could be covered by whatever, but we couldn't get COVID tests for the kids because we didn't have insurance. So we had to pay them out of pocket. And when the kids were moved, they didn't give them the insurance. So the new foster mom texted me to ask me for the insurance card because the agency was not giving it to them.
So you had the insurance card, or the agency had it, but they just didn't communicate that.
Yeah, so I had to send it myself to the new foster parents. After weeks.
And there was some, you said, and also in the testimony, I don't think it was you, I think it was your husband who mentioned that there was allegations against the agency around homophobia. Could you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because that to me is concerning, because like I said, I had a hearing on that, and as you can hear, the commissioner also said that that is something that's not tolerated. And so for me, that is also really important to kind of highlight, especially because we have such a high number of LGBT youth in the system. And if we have an agency that are doing homophobic things, that's a huge problem for me.
Yes, so the very first time that we reported this to the agency itself was to the caseworkers manager in November of 2023. Nothing came about. Then, when the first set of false allegations by the agency against us were filed in April and May of 2024, ACS actually made note in their final report when they were explaining why those allegations were unfounded, that we had voiced concern to them about the fact that we were being targeted for being gay. So they put it in their reports, but no one reached out to us. No one reached out to the caseworker. There was nothing that took place in order
And I
to help
remember
this.
because I was part of the interview, but when I saw the footage, it taught the ACS worker admitted that it was that the agency was doing this because of that, and you guys had it on a recording, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
OSI.
Yeah.
OSI caseworker knew it and said that the agency was not doing anything to address it.
Yeah, this is the Office of Special Investigations, which actually responds to all investigations into foster families. It was a whistleblower from within that department who told us that everyone basically knew that we were targeted for being gay and that they weren't willing to do anything about it. Who also said, by the way, that the allegations were going to continue, which is what exactly we're seeing now.
And how many allegations have been brought up against you guys thus far?
7, yes.
All from the agency or the birth parent?
So they're all from the agency and the birth parent, all 7. Okay.
And I'm excluding from my testimony anything related to the birth parent. I want to make it very clear that we are not a foster parent who are opposed to birth parents. We definitely believe in reunification.
Okay. And Lynn, Miss Lynn, you spoke about the birth parent of your grandchild. They were reunified with her, and then she did the same thing again. And did the kid? You have to talk into the mic. When they got taken away again, were they given back to you?
No,
Okay.
no.
Can you tell me what happened?
2.5 years later, she did it again. And at that time, the courts did not see the value in my son. They didn't see the value in Dad's. So what they did was they told me I would have to deal with her now to see my grandson. And for 2 years, I didn't see my grandson. And then I did. And then one day I got a call saying she left. Now she has 2 children. She left. And so they found my grandson's brother's aunt. They found the aunt, and she took my grandson in. And just recently, after a year of going back and forth, after the same judge a few years ago kept on trying to get the mother to take the children, my grandson is now with my son. He just got custody of his son. And the other child is with the aunt, but the mother won't release custody of that one. And she has a 3rd child, but not in care. They allowed her to keep the 3rd child. But I was not allowed to, yes, don't even the politics on that. But I was not allowed to see my grandchild for over 2 years, and my son was not allowed to see his son for a while, for a long time. We tried, we did it the right way. And then I said, the last time that I had been virtually in court, I said, we're going to be back around in this. And I know when he was with me, I put him on a schedule. I noticed he was on the spectrum. It was during 2020, 2021. I got him 6 evals virtually. He had services. Me and my sister taught him how to sign and say more. We had all these things. And then I didn't see him for two and a half years. And then when I saw him, he didn't remember me. And even though now he's with my son, he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know anything from when I had him. And it took him a while, but now he's verbalizing. You know, he's thriving. He's in school. He's doing well. And I'm grateful. I am grateful, but I'm also upset because had the court just listened when I said she was not equipped to do this, we would be here again. Had somebody listened, my grandson, it broke my son's heart, it broke my heart. My grandson said he still sees his mom on visits. And she's not even consistent with that. But he has come home and said, I want to see my mom, but my mom doesn't want to see me. And we continue. And I say, yes, some parents deserve their kids back. I am never going to say no. But I also say, and I know Children's Village says, return to parent. That's what our motto is. But not every parent needs to
Yeah.
we need to stop doing damage to kids.
But yeah, I think, and that's what it is, right? I think especially when you have loving people. So one, I just want to again say thank you guys for fighting for these young people. It's extremely important and also rare, right? We have a grandma fighting for her grandson, and we have folks who are fighting for their foster children. And please understand that it does matter. Whether you believe it or not, those kids will remember that you fought for them when no one else did. They'll remember that their grandmother stood for them and is fighting to see them. And even in this hearing today, because so many young people feel like they don't have a voice. And so I really appreciate the fight. And thank you, because I think also just highlighting some of the things that I was trying to even say in the hearing, that what is happening on the ground is not necessarily what the vision is, and then how do we clean this up? Because let's be clear, this is years and decades of things being one way, and now folks not being used to having people who are going to fight for their grandkids, or foster parents who are going to stand up and say, we want our kids and we want them to be put in the right situation. So I just want to say thank you guys for the work that you're doing.
I want to say one more, and you're welcome, but thank you for listening. But also, that is why I stay a member of the Parent Council of Children's Village. I stand because I almost left. I almost left a few years ago. But if I want to help make change, I have to stay where I'm at. So that is why I stay, being a voice to parents, so that I can help make change within, and also to thank the staff that has helped pour into these families, because I want to help make change.
And Mr. Lenson and Castro, are you guys still allowed to be foster parents? Because when I was last spoke, I was told that you guys are no longer allowed to be. And is it with that provider or just in general?
We have our license until the 22nd of March. The agency that licensed us notified us shortly, as all of this was going on, that they were closing our home because the specific reason is type of home not needed.
I'm sorry, excuse me?
The specific reason that our home is being closed is because type of home not needed.
Okay, well, that sounds interesting, because as we heard today, we're trying to do more recruitment for parents, and specifically LGBTQ parents, because we had a hearing, and Ali Fournier is going to be up here next, so they'll also talk about how we need more of these homes open, because we have such a great need in RHY community. So that actually really peeved me off. So I'm going to stop asking questions here, and I will definitely follow up. But thank you guys. Continue to fight. Do not stop fighting for these young people. Do not. I appreciate it. And whatever I can do to be supportive, my staff is around somewhere. So please connect with them as well. Thank you to this panel. I will be asking the next panel to come up. Galloway, Kearney Coughlin, Charles Budwick, and Sharon Brown. Hey girl, how you doing? I missed student karaoke with you this last weekend. Oh, up in Caucus? Yeah. Oh, I didn't even know they were doing it. I was hiding. Same. Whoever can start. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Stevens and the Committee on Children and Youth. My name is Galloway, and I'm the Advocacy Manager of the Ali Fournier Center, the nation's largest organization dedicated to serving unhoused LGBTQ youth. Today I'm here to talk about an urgent attention to the discrimination and systemic failures that LGBTQ youth and foster parents are facing within the New York City child welfare system. As we've already heard today, foster parents are experiencing this. Would love to connect to you, because ACS and OCFS has come to us trying to figure out how we can get more LGBTQ foster care parents, yet we're shutting them out. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But we've seen so much discrimination in the last year from SCR and ACS workers on homophobia and transphobia. And we need to talk about the accountability and the insufficient trainings the workers are compounding that trauma onto those queer and trans youth. I want to highlight, though, since June, we wrote this paper and we have been meeting with ACS to talk about these needed changes. And these are some ways that we've started to work with them already. We've included and established a division of child protections for LGBTQIA point people. We've established it and started to facilitate best practice trainings. They developed a prevention plan for families, and they designated an RHY point person in these division of child protections. That's great, but we got more work to do. I want to highlight the things that we need to get done. First, we got to create a policy reform. They have not updated the policy reform from ACS since 2012. So we need to make sure that LGBTQ youth are included in that. And we want to recommend that we structure this system to using a red, yellow, and green flag to ensure that workers respond appropriately. So this is really checking those workers. Secondly, we need to have a tailored mental health services so LGBTQ youth in the foster care experience higher forms of depression and anxiety, so we need a partner to fast track those. Third, affirming family therapy, comprehensive education programs, and lastly, just want to highlight the legislation we're supporting, which is Intro 56, Intro 81, and Intro 52. Again, I'm here to talk further about these needed changes, but want to make sure others have time, so thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Kearney Coughlin, and I am a policy fellow in the Family Defense Practice at Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem. As family defenders, we are often in the position of seeking accountability from foster agencies, but we can't do that without City Council's help. We know that these agencies receive over $600 million from ACS, yet it's astonishingly hard to get information on these contracts or the data that they collect. We're asking the Council to support transparency in data and evaluation, to provide accountability to families, and to facilitate stronger oversight by the Council. The parents we represent have their children ripped away from them because of speculation that the children are at risk. The children are then put in foster placements where rates of disappearance, abuse, and trafficking are shockingly high, but their parent can't protect them. An estimated 19% of children and youth who go missing from foster placements experience sex trafficking. In spite of this, we do not have access to foster agencies' policies on this phenomenon or even data on the number of children who are missing from their placements. At The Reckoning, Graham Windham, New York Foundling, and Good Shepherd, three of New York's biggest foster agencies, owned up to the harm they've done, particularly to Black families, and affirmed their commitment to prioritizing family integrity. But we still hear about foster parents using their position as a power trip and keeping kids from their families without any agency repercussions. Foster placements receive payment for each child they have, in addition to having a clothing allowance for the child. Yet our clients are reporting that their children are showing up for visits, wearing nothing more than a denim jacket in these sub-freezing temperatures. To our knowledge, there is no audit to ensure foster placements use these funds for the benefit of the child. We also know that foster agencies steal survivor and disability benefits from the children in their care. This was raised at a hearing last spring, and we still don't have answers on where that money is now. It is a massive conflict of interest when foster agencies are tasked with monitoring themselves, or when ACS, their contract provider, who never doesn't renew contracts, is meant to monitor them. There needs to be data that is publicly available and easily accessible so that the people of New York can see what's really going on. Thank you to the committee members and the chair for your time and attention to this matter. I'll be submitting written testimony with more detailed recommendations.
Good afternoon, Chair Stevens. My name is Chaz Budnick. I work at the Brooklyn Defender Services.
Could you just pull your mic down a little bit, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Within the Family Defense Practice, which represents parents in Article 10 abuse and neglect cases, and specifically, I work in our Preserving Family Bonds team, which focuses on late-stage foster care cases and termination of parental rights filings. And I'm here to talk about some disconnects. The chair recognized that there have been some disconnects between what was said about policy today and what's happening on the ground. We see that case planning lacks alignment with the law. That the law says that the state's first obligation is to provide parents with the assistance necessary to reunify and to support kinship and return to parent. We're not seeing that happen. And we're seeing that case planning is not aligned with social science, that children need security, to feel safe and loved, and to know that the world is predictable and at least makes sense. that the person to whom a child is attached is a person that they see meeting their needs, and that parents' opportunities to do that within the system is severely restricted and is not reflective of their capacity or their desire to do so. That children can be provided with security through stable connections to extended family, friends, neighborhoods, and schools, and that from the custody context, when there is significant conflict between caregivers, that becomes a problem that's internalized for children. And so what we would like to see is that case planning stays in foster care temporary and brief, that there is an actual move to implement the policy of least restrictive visitation, that if there is a removal, there should be consideration of the duties of parenting that can still be performed, such as school pickup and drop-off, attendance at curriculars, involvement of parents in their children's medical and mental health and educational needs, and an ongoing voice in how their children are doing, and it's an opportunity for agencies and foster parents or resource families to ally with parents for the best needs of children. We're also asking that case planning become collaborative and not about ultimatums, that agencies are uniquely positioned to make sure that these connections between providers for children and other schools and places that they're encountering are connected to parents, that they have access to that information, and that they're sharing that information with resource families. And we think that this will be something that will promote the best interests of children. And we're asking that case planning be reactive and proactive, and that from the beginning, from removal, there is planning for reunification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can submit that so we could also follow up as well. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sharon Brown. Before I start, I would just like to say, remember Israel, defend Israel.
Can you please make sure you stay on topic? Thank you.
Yes, I will. Release the hostages, let Yahweh's people go. Okay. The foster care system, the way it is set up now is just to take children out of the homes and instead of reunification, they try to keep the children, have them adopted and things like that. But as it was testified, the monies for the children are abused and not given to the child or used for the child. They are out there without the proper garments for the weather and things like that. Their education, different things like that, is not taken care of the way the parent would. I think that the foster care system can use some of the funds that they have and use that if the parents specifically has a problem with money. The foster care system could use that to fund the parents. Not that they would really be foster care for their own children, but they could technically
give them additional support.
Now, the ACS, a lot of times we've heard bad things about the ACS. They've allowed things to happen to children. So when they step in, I'm going to applaud them now, because I don't believe that children should be in homosexual homes. So I agree with the agencies and what they have done and stated. And for everyone that's fighting for there to be LGBTQ parents, there's me and many of us that are going to fight to try to stop that. The agency has spoken. They said they do not want it. They have made the decision based on what this nation stands for. We are a Jewish Christian nation. We call it Judeo-Christian. That just means Jewish Christian. And that is our values, no homosexuality. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Well, one, I want to say that we do support everyone, especially the LGBTQ. They're a part of our community. We will continue to fight for them and ensure that equity is happening and make sure that we have those homes available. And but we respect everyone's views. But Lauren, I would love to make sure that we connect you with this family who, I know Ali Fournier has done amazing work, and want to make sure that some of my bigger supporters and we're working with this family to figure out some solutions, because as we know, there is a report that Ali Fournier put out last year around the need for LGBTQ families to be foster parents. And we talked about what that looks like at a hearing in September. So we want to figure out how to make sure that we're connecting those families. But I also wanted to just ask a question around the transparency. I know you said that you were looking to have more transparency. What would that look like as far as what are the things that you feel like is not available to you that you need so that you can get access?
I mean, one thing we'd love to have is access to the contracts between ACS and the foster agencies. We find a lot of times there's sort of a passing the buck between ACS and the agencies of who's responsible for what. And
Have you foiled to get access to the contracts, or has that not, they have not been able to provide it? Was it redacted?
I think in some cases we have, but there's so many that it just it ends up being a huge thing to get done, and if we could collaborate with City Council on that, I think it would make it a lot easier of a lift so that it's not like a game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
The other thing is I think there's some significant challenges with ACS being the one to produce the data on foster agencies. I have looked through a lot of the reports. It is hard to sift through what is actually happening, especially in the weak points, and not have it be just like a let's pat ourselves on the back sort of report. And I am grateful that the system is improving and that numbers are getting better, but there's still a lot of issues of concern, and there's things that we hear in our clients' stories that isn't being reflected in the data. So it's hard to tell how pervasive that is if ACS and the agencies aren't collecting data on those things, and we don't know that because we don't have the data.
Okay. I would love to connect you with my chief of staff, Lamont, who's here, so we can set up some time to talk about what those transparencies would look like, and figuring out how we can make the process a little bit easier and streamline it moving forward. Always are looking to make sure that things are transparent, because that's what it should be, right? These are taxpayers' money, so we should be knowing how it's spent. So thank you to this panel, and thank you for your testimony. That concludes the in-person portion of public testimony. We now move to remote testimony. If you are testifying remotely, please listen for your name to be called. Once your name is called, a member of the staff will unmute you. You may start your testimony once the Sergeant of Arms starts the clock and cues you to begin. First person on Zoom, Pedro Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Althea Stevens, and to everyone in the committee. My name is Pedro Gonzalez. I'm a father of Hope Bella Marie Gonzalez and Sofia Milagros Gonzalez. Subsequently, I have had experience with ACS now for 6 years. I do want to note to Jess Danhauser and to the ACS team that the processes between the foster agency and ACS have streamlined, and it's been more smooth. Visitation has been much more streamlined. There hasn't been any concerns with that. And as far as the communication goes, there's been some tough conversations that had to have, but were necessary to drive the case forward. It seems that the family does recognize that the courts as well played a vital role in keeping reunification, which is something that I've previously discussed with your office. I want to recognize that ACS has been pushing more for reunification with families, and maybe in certain cases it's not the best outcome for the children. It just varies by a case-by-case basis. But I do want to note that ACS in the 2024 year has improved, and I also want to thank the foster agency as well, Children's Aid Society, for being there during my time of need and grieving. I recently lost my mother, I want to say, on December 29th. She was laid to rest on January 8th. One of the biggest parts of the conversation that I had with her prior to her passing was about, parenting and what's in the best interest of the children, and, driving the reunification process forward. Obviously, I have Ms. Kimonis here with me as well, if she wanted to say a few words. But as far as it goes, right now it's looking like the case is headed to a right direction. We're about to go post-disposition on the case. I would like to make a few suggestions with ACS. Moving forward, one of the concerns is because of the family's past history with ACS involvement, that would be significantly a trigger for possible investigations being opened in the future. We do recognize that the processes have been much more streamlined and much more proficient. As far as the latest allegations have gone, they were unfounded. So I do want to thank the Office of Special Investigations, as well as OCFS and the Child Protection Office for ACS. It seems to me that
Thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, time expired. So, but thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear these positive updates. I know you've been very consistent at being at hearings and advocating for your rights. So I'm really happy to hear that there has been a turn for the positive in your case. But I do want to remind you, we do have something in my office for you. So please drop by the district office, you and your wife. I know my chief of staff has been in contact with you. So make sure you stop in and condolences to you and your family regarding your mom, and we'll continue to pray for you both. Thank you. Next we have on Zoom is Darlene Rosenberg.
You may begin.
Yes, it's Davine Roseborough. Yes, my name is Davine Roseborough. I'm a parent advocate at the Center for Family Representation. Thank you, Chair Stevens, the committee, and City Council for giving us this opportunity to testify. CFR is a citywide assigned indigent defense provider for parents who are facing ACS prosecution in Lower Manhattan, Queens, Richmond County. CFR is also a conflict provider for parents representation in the Bronx County. CFR employs a interdisciplinary model of representation. Every parent is assigned a attorney, social worker, staff member, and these members are supported by a paralegal, supervisor, and parent advocate. CFR help families prevent and navigate family police and investigations and work zealously to reunite families who are separated by the foster care system. We know that family safety and well-being can be achieved without surveillance, prosecution, and separation. We join the testimony of the other defense officers calling for additional data to improve transparency, accountability to promote family integrity. At CFR, we often see that families are separated and children are placed into the foster care system. Fundamental questions about safety are replaced with questions around compliance. As an impacted parent, myself, raised in the foster care system, I have been punished about the compliance with the agency. And it seems like this was the agency cared about the most. Often the focus was placed on the rules that the agency were trying to enforce or my attitude towards the workers rather than the services I completed and the determination and drive I had in meeting the needs of my children and addressing any safety concerns. This hindered my process with obtaining my children back in my care. At CFR, we see countless other families experience the same thing.
Oh, it's very ghetto. Are you still there? Well, thank you for your testimony. I don't know if we were able to get her back, but thank you for your testimony. I call the next online Zoom, Tanisha Grant.
You may begin.
Okay, Ronald Richard. Ronald Richard, you may begin. Okay. If there's no one else in the room that would like to have the opportunity to testify, but wish to do, someone who's in the room who would like to testify, but wish to do so, please raise your hand. Okay, great. Seeing no one else who wishes to testify, I would like to say thank you to everyone who came in today. This is a very important issue to me, and honestly, I think that we are moving in the right direction, but we're not there yet. And so we'll continue to push forward and work with ACS around transparency and making sure that providers are doing what they need to do and understanding how do we shift the culture that has often been in a different direction for so many years. But I would like to thank the commissioner for coming today and answering questions, and Stephanie, as always, who worked so hard to prepare for this hearing. And thank you to all the advocates and families who continue to fight for the family. Wait, she's back? Davina Rosenberg, is she back?
You may begin.
Well, she can finish up. We're not gonna start from the top. Is she back? All right, well, she's not back. She frozen still. Well, Davina, I'm really sorry. We'll have you submit it. But with that, I would like to adjourn this hearing. Thank you.
Sorry, she was like talking and then she
I gotta go. I gotta